joint committees. I'd like to take this opportunity quickly, if I may, just to introduce my colleagues who are with us today. Very pleased to welcome Councillor Toby Savage, the leader of South Gloucestershire Council, Councillor Dina Romero, the leader of Bath and North East Somerset Council, Councillor Don Davis, leader of North Somerset Council, and Professor Steve West, the chairman of our local enterprise partnership. Mayor Marvin Rees from Bristol City Council has sent his apologies for today's meeting. I'm very pleased to welcome Councillor Kai Dudd, who is both the Bristol Cabinet Member for Transport, somebody we work very closely with, and is substituting for Mayor Rees today. Just before we move on to the rest of the business, just like to mention a few points in connection with today's virtual meeting. The meeting is being broadcast on the Combined Authorities YouTube channel for the public to be able to watch. Members and officers are reminded that if they could assist with the sound quality by muting their microphones when they're not speaking, that would be welcome. We are making arrangements for members of the public to join the meeting to present their statements where they have requested this. Hopefully this will run smoothly, but just to note, please, that all statements received have been circulated and have been read by committee members. They are also available on the Combined Authorities website. So I'd like to now just move on to item 2 on the agenda, if we may, and that's to formally acknowledge apologies for absence. As I just mentioned, Mayor Marvin Rees has sent his apologies, and as I've said, we're very pleased to welcome Councillor Kai Dudd in his absence. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Members, may I ask you if you have any declarations of interest that you would like to make about any items on the agenda or items that might be raised? I note for the record that there are no declarations of interest today. Item 4, the minutes of our previous meeting. That was a joint meeting of the 2 committees held on the 20th of March, which was our last time we met physically in Bristol. The minutes of that meeting have been circulated with the meeting papers. Members, were there any comments about the accuracy of those minutes? I note there aren't, so members, are you content that I sign those at a point in the future as a correct record? I know people are nodding. Thank you. Just 1 or 2 quick announcements from if I may. We've all been living in very challenging times in the last few months. I've been incredibly pleased to see how our region has really worked together, pulled together at so many levels to help so many people across the region. So a very, very big personal thank you, and I know I speak on behalf of everybody here today, for those who've been working so hard, our key workers, especially including our council workers, of course our amazing NHS, those people working in the care sector, our volunteers, businesses, and so many others. So a very big thank you on behalf of all of us to everybody who has rallied together in our region. We've seen some incredible collaboration at very, very local levels, but I've also been very pleased in how businesses have stepped up to the mark in terms of helping provide PPE, helping support health and care workers, and many of those other incredible list of things that so many people as businesses have been doing to help as well. Throughout the whole period, I know all of our councils have been working incredibly hard, and our team at the Combined Authority has been working closely along with transport operators and others to ensure key workers can continue to travel around the region. It's been really important for us to now think about those next steps and those next levels. So that's why we're now focusing through our transport teams on how we work with our operators to effectively introduce social distancing measures and making sure that people are able to confidently and safely start returning to work, returning to retail as businesses open up. We have been talking to many businesses, and I'd like to use this opportunity to ask people wherever possible, please, to encourage their staff to use cycling and walking measures to change start times. and look at how ways that different employers can make a difference in how we move forward in the future. We've also stepped up an awful lot of the work we did with our business support teams here at the Combined Authority, as I know our councils have been, helping businesses to find much needed support. We've also changed some of our programs, such as expanding our career coaching and support service, Future Bright, to help people whose jobs and incomes have been affected by coronavirus. We've also launched new programs to see how we can help attract or affect some of those more immediate needs. For example, better trading online to help small businesses enhance their web presence by adopting new technology. But those are just some of the very few things that we've all been doing. And this is just the start now about how we all work to ensure our region continues to be a great place to live and work for everybody in the future. So we will be focusing through our recovery plans on how we support businesses, how we improve our connections, both through transport and digital. And really importantly for all of us, how we look to provide the skills and the training that residents of all ages will be needing in the future. And as always, innovation, low carbon will be at the heart of the new future as we look to make the best of the challenging times we've had and work together to provide new opportunities for everybody across the region. So thank you again to everybody who's been working so hard in the last few months. Item 6 we now move on to. This is items from the public. At this stage, may I just remind everybody that we had received 26 questions. As usual, these details have been circulated to members and written answers have been provided to those who raised the questions. We've also received 19 statements. We touched on earlier, we've made arrangements for members of the public to join this meeting to present statements where they have requested to do so. As we work through the statements, Democratic Service colleagues will admit individuals by turn into the meeting to present their statements. I remind everybody that they have up to 3 minutes per statement. So as soon as the individual has finished, Democratic Services will remove that person unless one of our members wanted to just quickly raise a point with them. And they can then follow the rest of the meeting through our YouTube channel. So this is where Ian is going to help manage this section. The first of our speakers, as I understand it, is Dave Redwell. Dave.
Yes, so David Redwell is in the waiting room. So Suzanne, could you please let David into the room, please? Hi, David, are you there?
Yes. Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Dave,
yes.
Very warm welcome to you and nice to see you. You're very familiar with the usual process here. Very keen to ask you and invite you to talk to the committee for up to 3 minutes. Dave.
Thank you. Well, first of all, let me put on record thanks to Peter Mann and the team at WECA for all the work they've been doing on keeping the bus services and the rail services moving during the COVID-19 crisis. We've done quite well in keeping the emergency services running, and I think that's a tribute to WECA and to the authorities, and particularly also to James Freeman and Rupert Cox at Stagecoach. It's the next bit I'm worried about now. There are two things. One, there's a need for a passenger forum and that could be Zoom rather than one that meets in public. So I don't think that's practical. And the second is to have a customer service line for members of the public that need to know about service changes and make comments to WECA and through to North Somerset about bus services as they change rapidly. And then it's really how we recover the buses, because as Tim said, and I agree with you at the select committee, and that was very good, put in Bristol's case, Greater Bristol's case to the Parliament. but we need to find a way now of making sure that the secondary routes come back. So your Marshfield, your South Bristol circles, some of the more poorer, deprived parts of the city regions of Bristol and Bath. And we get those buses back. Now, they might be low frequency, they may have to peak hour journeys only. They may result of, I'm thinking about this with James Freeman working with, and WECA working with the secondary operators and perhaps subcontracting the route from Marshfield to Kingswood, or subcontracting the route between Bath and Bristol via Bitton and Longwell Green, or some of the weekend services between Radstock and Bristol, or the South Bristol circles. If First hasn't got the resources and drivers, they've done it before with the university, and it's a way of keeping the services moving, but we need to bring those services back. And I would like WECA officers in particular, and Bristol City Council and the South Gloucester and North Somerset, particularly Baines, to sit down and look at these routes very carefully in terms of social need, really, and making sure we don't miss these hospitals. Because I'm aware of young people not being able to get to and from work without public bus services at the moment, since the 15th of June. On rail, I'm very anxious that Portway Park and Ride, we don't stop work on that, and we get on with that particular project. Network Rail can work under the COVID environment, and they can work under the emergency regulations from Oxford Road and Rail. And particularly, we make progress on the Metro West project. And we need to look carefully at social distant bus stops. Can I thank Marvin Rees particularly, and Dina and South Gloucestershire for the work on social distant bus stops. I think that's been happening quite well across all issues, across all three authorities.
30 seconds left, Dave.
And I think one of the other issues really is to make sure we get this link back from Portishead to Cribbs Causeway. Young people are very concerned having to come in to Bristol to go to work in Cribbs Causeway and to go to Southmead Hospital when the link should be to the bus station. So I welcome all the work that's going on. Hopefully we're going to push forward light rail. I know Marvin wants to do that. I know Baines wants to do that. Light rail is very, very important. We don't stop on that. And I just think that we need to make sure there, in fact, I would say this, there's to be more meetings of WECA scrutiny and more meetings of WECA board to keep the public engaged and informed than less. And I think that should be looked at and reviewed. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Dave, thank you very much. If there was nothing anyone would like to add to that, my list suggests that Councillor Gullit was the next person submitting a statement who would like to address.
Yes, Councillor Gullit, Chair, is in the waiting room. So Suzanne, could you please let Councillor Gullit into the room? Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. I was about to say you're on mute, but I think you're now with us. Hello. You're a lot brighter now. I can see you. Jeff, very warm welcome to you. You're very welcome to talk to the committee for up to 3 minutes. And if you're happy, we'll suggest your time starts now. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Good morning, all. And I'm delighted to have this chance to speak, but concerned about the issue I'm raising. I'm glad that Kai is there. Kai, this isn't a political criticism of you. This is a councillor's frustration at the way the system has worked, and I think you need to know the problem. I think, to emphasise, this is a concern of myself as a councillor for Westbury-on-Trim and Henleys, but also your colleague Brenda Massey as councillor for Southmead, who shares my frustration, and you have a statement from her later on in the pack. So my point is that the agenda for this meeting has a massive number of papers. I, as a ward councillor, can only know the detail and accuracy insofar as my ward is concerned. I have to rely on the quality of the papers for everything else. So when I actually wade through and find in the cycling and walking infrastructure plan the mention of a road junction that doesn't exist because the two roads are a mile apart, I have a concern, because I can see that the report hasn't been quality checked by those who produced it. Now, we all make typos. I do more than most, but I find it really concerning that scrutiny is asked to scrutinise and you are asked to make decisions on reports with an error in them, because I look at the rest of the report, which is complex stuff that I can't possibly assess. And I have no way of knowing whether it's right or not. So I just feel that that is a real issue. Now, since I put in my statement, I recognise that there was a consultation that took place, but I have an issue that I think WECA needs to address, is that when you're dealing with structural high-level consultations, you attract responses from specialists. David Redgewell does a fantastic job. He has absolute knowledge on his subject, but you don't, with the same report, attract responses from local residents. So you're not getting a view. So you end up with local residents feel they haven't been consulted.
30
Now
seconds, Jeff, please.
Yeah, so that raises my final point, which is this report is badged as WECA. I don't believe WECA officers could possibly have known the detail to have prepared it. So therefore, the underlying authority has a responsibility to get it right. But WECA should not badge those reports with its name if it hasn't checked the correctness of the report that's going out. Otherwise, there's reputational damage to WECA, which in my audit committee role is a matter of great concern. I hope I've covered all the areas, but I would like you both at this meeting and away from the meeting to consider the points I've raised, because I think they are fundamental to the governance of the authority. Thank you, Tim.
Jeff, thank you very much and appreciate your comment. Kai, did you, I see.
Yeah, I'd like to
comment?
respond to some of that really, Tim, because I think there was some criticism of me and my officers there. Jeff, yeah, I accept that. Obviously, you made some fair points there, but just in terms of the chance to get involved in the process and the consultation, I mean, this is a piece of work that's been going on for 18 months, 2 years within the council. There's been a 6-month consultation process. There's been a number of workshops offered by officers at Bristol City Council where ward members could get involved. So I think the idea that, you know, we sort of rammed this through without consulting properly with members is not correct. I think there was plenty of opportunities for members to actively get involved in this, and you know, if members decided not to take up those opportunities, and I think that criticism is on the member themselves rather than me or my officers as the cabinet member.
If I might respond,
Kai,
Tim.
thank you very much. Very, very briefly, please, if you wouldn't mind,
Yeah.
Jeff, and then so we can move on.
Indeed, I would have expected that response. I feel my credibility is more justified by the fact that a senior member of the Labour Party as a councillor for a neighbouring ward also feels that we have not been involved in the process. It wasn't a criticism of Kai, I made that clear, but I do believe we've got to do it better. Saying you've done it isn't sufficient. It's got to, residents have got to feel they've been consulted. And if you fail to do that, then actually there's a democratic deficit here. You're failing to engage with the people that really matter, the people who elect us.
Jeff, thank you very much. Happy to just let you have the last couple of seconds there, but thank you for that. Points are noted, and thanks for taking the time to come to join us today. Thank you. Ian, I believe that Dave Andrews is the next member.
Yes, Chair, Dave Andrews is next and is in the waiting room. Suzanne, could you please admit Dave Andrews to the meeting? Thank you.
Dave Andrews is the next member.
Yes, Chair, Dave Andrews is next and is in the waiting room. Suzanne, could you please admit Dave Andrews to the meeting? Thank you.
I believe Mr. Andrews looks as though there may be. Could we just make sure, and whilst I'm very happy to see Jeff, I can see Jeff is still currently in this meeting. I think the process is that we bring one statement reader in at a time. Isn't that correct, Ian? Dave Andrews is the next member.
Yes, Chair, Dave Andrews is next. And
thank you. Jolly good. Dave, I can only see a lamp on a table here, which looks charming, but could you just switch your microphone on, please? Thank you, Dave. Your microphone needs to be on. Lovely. Nice to see you. You have up to 3 minutes to talk to us, and I'll remind you when you've got 30 seconds left to go.
Okay, can you hear me all right?
Yes, thank you. Please,
okay, I want to say,
starting now.
Yeah, I want to say thank you very much for listening to. I'm by the way chairman of Bath Trams, so thank you very much to WECA for listening to our points on the tram, and that some tram schemes are included in the transformational schemes in JLTP4, which is very good. Thank you so much. Tim mentioned low carbon, and I wanted to make it first of all very clear that trams are very, very low carbon. And also the overwhelming evidence, this is the key point, that is a fact. It's not a theory or an opinion. The overwhelming fact is that buses do not get car drivers out of their cars. Like it or not, that's the fact. Bus use is declining at 4% per annum since the 50s. The only cities where people have been got out of their cars voluntarily has been those that have put trams in. So you've got Croydon, Manchester, Nottingham, Sheffield, Docklands, Birmingham, Edinburgh. Edinburgh was a fiasco, but now it's a great success and being extended. So to think that a strategy to be in line with climate change and low pollution and making the area thrive is delusional. It's wishful thinking. It's not based on any fact at all. The only method of transport that has been shown to achieve this is steel rails, steel-wheeled vehicles. And that's because trams are a much higher quality of service. They're roomy, they can run on time, they can run at 6-minute intervals for much longer periods than a bus can, because they're very, very low running costs. And we believe that trams integrated, we're not against buses, that both Bath and Bristol should have a spine, a backbone of light rail integrated with trams. That's the only way you can achieve actually cut congestion and cut pollution. And also the thing that people don't want to think about is the deadly rubber tire pollution. So vehicles produce more particulates, which are thought to be responsible for many lung infections, including spreading COVID, is the deadly rubber tire dust that rubber tired vehicles emit. You also have to consider that trams have a
30 seconds left. Thank you.
4 to 5 times greater carrying capacity than buses. And because they're actually cheaper per passenger kilometre, they are much more cost effective. And it's been shown they will rejuvenate city centres. That's happened in all those cities I mentioned, where they have cut congestion and businesses do thrive because people will go in on a tram. And it cannot be done with cars or buses alone. You need a central spine of light rail and tram. That's about it.
Dave, thank you very much indeed. I know your passion in this from speaking to you on various occasions, and thank you for bringing your comments forward. In that case, please. I believe Mr. Smith is next in, is that correct?
Yes, Chair. Gavin Smith is in the waiting room. So Suzanne, please could you admit Gavin Smith?
Mr. Smith, I can see your name appearing on the screen. At the moment, it looks as though you're on mute. You'd like to unmute and just
I've unmuted.
if you're there, thank you. I can hear you. Thank you very much. So please, if you'd like to, we've received your statement. Very welcome to talk to the committee for up to 3 minutes, and your time starting now, sir.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Sorry, there's I think I need to turn something else off on my machine. Hang on a sec. Sorry, I'm following the meeting as well, and it means that I actually can't. Am I? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, Mr. Smith, and if I can, I'm assuming everybody else can. So please, back to you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Yeah, it's Gavin Smith from the Transport for Greater Bristol Alliance. We support the emerging bus strategy.
Mr. Smith,
Sorry.
you might want to turn off your YouTube whilst you're talking to the committee.
Yeah, I'm doing my best to work out how the hell to do that. Sorry, this is a bit of a mess here. Apologies for this. Sorry, I think I might be all right now. Sorry about this. Yeah.
Okay, let's resume quickly if you may, Mr. Smith, please.
Apologies. Yeah, Gavin Smith, Transport for Greater Alliance, Transport for Greater Bristol Alliance. We support WECA's emerging bus strategy, particularly in response, especially in relating to its park and ride and bus interchanges. And in particular, we'd like to push for park and ride on the M32 with continuous bus lanes into town. And also in that regard, compulsory purchase should not be shied away from. We eventually would like to see the M32 demotorway in its grade separated junctions to ground level. We'd also like to see park and ride on the A37 by Whitchurch and the A38 up in Filton. Those may be outside Bristol, but the authorities within which they are generate most of the traffic. So it's of mutual interest to do that. Bus interchanges, great. We've already developed them at Southmead Hospital, Bristol Parkway, Old Market, etc. We'd like to see more similar equivalents at suburban interchanges where they can also interchange with orbital buses, Fish Ponds, Bedminster Braid, Kingswood, and in the city centre at Old Market, yes. Triangle East should be two-way buses. Temple Meads, buses should be on Friary. That's been a continuing planning disaster down there. The centre, Haymarket, Cabot Circus, Bond Street, Temple Way. Decent interchanges in those places are what we need. All Bristol's buses, we think, probably will end up being rebranded as Metrobus. That's fine. But that's only one half of a decent public transport strategy. The other one, and I agree here with Dave from Bath, should be rapid transit. As he pointed out, that's what has been happening all around Europe, all around the world. Nottingham, Sheffield, Manchester, Croydon, Edinburgh, soon to be Cardiff. Bristol really does need to catch up on that as well. So we support the development of the Metro West rail plan, but only as the first phase of a fuller plan. Those corridors for which Metro West can't serve, they should be modern tram systems. So we support WECA's and BCC's various ideas on a tram on Gloucester Road to A38 and the A4 Bath Road. That's fine. What we don't agree with is any underground proposals. We think they're unnecessarily expensive, excessively expensive, dysfunctional in terms of both station frequency and disability. So we don't support that. Nor do we support rapid transit access to Bristol Airport, whose expansion has already been halted, one would hope, by North Somerset.
May I ask you to wrap up in 15 seconds, certainly.
Certainly. We're also doing a traffic management plan, and the aim there is to cut running traffic through Bristol, because unless you tackle the amount of traffic shoved through our roads, and it's a ward matter really, you will never really alter people's travel habits, together with a parking plan. So neighbourhoods are permeable to public transport, cycling, buses, access traffic, but impermeable to through traffic. And that will really only ever be solved politically by working through, I suspect, neighbourhood councillors who will show an interest.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I've tried to accommodate your earlier technical points. So thank you very much for that. And so much of what you're saying is in line with our plans. So I'm glad you're endorsing so much of what we're talking about. So thank you very much indeed. In that case, I believe Mr. Daniel is next. Is that correct, Ian?
Yes, that's right, Chair. Dick Daniel is in the waiting room. Suzanne, could you please let Dick Daniel into the meeting room, please?
Daniel, hello. Well, nice to see you. Your microphone's on mute at the moment by the looks of things. Perhaps you'd like to just...
Sorry, microphone. I'm just going to turn off the YouTube.
Okay. And in that case, sir, you're very welcome to speak to the committee for up to 3 minutes, and we'll consider your time starting now.
Hello, thank you. I've been involved in transport issues, done studies and research on both transport and built environment over 35 years. I want to start for a quote with the Government Minister for Transport. Public transport and active travel will be the natural choice for our daily activities. WECA suffers from the same outdated thinking that's affected transport planning for over a century now. This is that faster, further is better, that the longer the journey is, the more important it is. Far more resources go into the motorways and road building than into local networks, even though around half of commuter journeys are under 3 miles and 60% of all journeys are under 5 miles. WECA's own consultation says people want local and active travel. So COVID-19 has changed so much. Active travel not only allows for social distancing, but also creates a means of taking daily exercise, which improves our health. During lockdown, I've met 6 people who have in this time bought electric bikes. As my wife says, without safe space, most won't cycle. When she says safe space, she means segregated cycle routes, not a white line. COVID-19 does not mean public transport is not important. It is. What is missing is a backbone of high capacity trams linked to buses and local transport hubs. How is this going to be paid? Well, up to 5 billion on roads is a lot of money. Stop almost all road building now. Repurpose the money and the jobs and create even more jobs, building proper linked segregated cycle networks and installing a network of high capacity tram lines. Your own figures show that for every £1 spent on cycling, there are £14 worth of benefits. Research also shows that people who walk and cycle to shops use local shops more. Now is a great opportunity. WECA's stated aim to go carbon neutral by 2030, which is only 10 years away, needs to be done now for our health, for the benefit of the regional economy, and to hit that carbon neutral target.
30 seconds.
The strategy needs to be shortest journeys first, based on fully linked segregated cycle networks for an 8-year-old. In other words, safe enough for an 8-year-old, great public transport based on a backbone of trams links to buses, and very importantly, car and vehicle restraint. Now, if you haven't watched the Ghent video, please can I ask you to look at the Ghent video that I sent in with my submission. Now is the time to act. Thank you.
Daniel, thank you very much indeed. Appreciate you taking the time to come to talk to us.
Thank you.
And in that case, thank you very much. Ian, I believe our next person in the waiting, or I'm hoping the next person in the waiting room is Mrs. Dicker.
Yes, Faye Dicker is in the waiting room. Suzanne, please could you let Faye Dicker into the meeting? Thank you.
Faye, hello. I can see your tile on the screen. At the moment, it suggests your microphone's on mute.
Hi there.
There we are. Perfect. I can hear you now. Thank you very much indeed. Very, very welcome. If you've been following on YouTube, you'll have seen that we've got up to 3 minutes. You're very welcome to talk to us for up to that, and I'll remind you when you've got 30 seconds left. Over to you now.
The plan for one specific new road was one that attracted the most overwhelming response in the JLTP4 consultation. It was the new road to be built from the A4 to the A37 and onto Whitchurch Lane. It caused and still causes much anguish to the local residents, with the threat of it hanging over our heads. This at a time when we have a pandemic to deal with. As you are aware, I am the founder of the South Bristol Wrong Road Group. The members in the thousands made it very clear during your consultation that the plans were ill thought through. The idea of using Whitchurch Lane, a residential road, was a major weak link in the plans. This was coupled with building a new road across valuable greenbelt, a road that we cannot afford financially or environmentally. Thousands of us who discovered the plans by accident have been making our thoughts known to you peacefully and appropriately. Please do not ignore us. Instead, please work with us from the outset when you decide to make improvements to our area in the future. When will WECA acknowledge that using Whitchurch Lane as part of the orbital route is totally unsuitable?
Thank you. Right, thank you very much. Appreciate your statement and nice to see you. So thank you very much indeed. Appreciate you
Likewise.
taking your
Thank
time.
you, Tim.
Lovely, nice to see you. Cheerio. And in that case, Ian, I believe Hicks is next on my list. Is she with us? Do you know?
Yes, Kim Hicks is next, Chair. She's in the waiting room. Suzanne, please could you let Kim Hicks into the meeting? Thank you.
So, hello, thank you. I was just about to say your microphone looks to be on mute. I can see can you just say hello, please? So we can just make sure everyone can hear you. Looks as though you're back on mute again, Kim.
Hello.
There
Can
we
you
are.
hear me?
Lovely. Yes, we can now. So hopefully you've seen from the others, very welcome to talk to us for up to 3 minutes, and we'll consider your time starting now.
Thank you very much. There are 3 things that you can do to improve when you're looking at the plans for local cycling, walking and infrastructure. 1, your communication. 2, your communication. 3, your communication. The recent local joint transport plan consultation had nearly 2,000 people from the Bristol South area take the time and trouble to let you know their thoughts and views. These responses were from a small fraction of the WECA area, and yet they were a third of all the responses from the whole WECA area. I am an active member of the Bristol South Wrong Road group who has attempted to engage with you using appropriate channels, and yet I still feel ignored. It feels like WECA has only given lip service to the thousands of responses. Sadly, your engagement with the local people on this issue does not appear to be genuine. In view of the circumstances, it would be good to see WECA produce a statement to communicate in plain English, a statement for the thousands of people who faithfully responded to the JLTP4 consultation and yet feel that no one was really listening. There are so many uncertainties at this time due to COVID-19. The climate emergency is another factor that concerns so many people. Just knowing that WECA are not going ahead with the idea to build a totally unsuitable road through South Bristol as planned in the JLTP4 would be just one thing less for residents to worry about. I do hope WECA are listening. Your answer to my question 16 was disappointing. Likewise, your answer to number 20 is really worrying when North Somerset are the co-authors of the JLTP4 and their roads are used as part of the orbital route movement around South Bristol. Thank you to Jeff Gullit for pointing out just how difficult communication has been. We found out by accident it was really not fair, and it's only because of the work of a lot of volunteers in our local area you had such a good response from us. I do hope WECA are really truly listening and going to respond appropriately. Thank you. And take care, everybody. Keep safe.
Thank you very much, and appreciate you joining in, and please again, yes, take care. Appreciate those sentiments. And in that case, please, I believe from my list that Boston is next. Is that the case, Ian?
Yes, Julie Boston is next and is in the waiting room. Suzanne, please could you let Julie Boston into the meeting? Thank you.
Thank you. I can now see that you've joined the meeting. It does look to me as though your microphone might be on mute. Perhaps you could unmute and then say hello, and then we can introduce you. you. You're still on mute, Julie. Hello, would you like to let us know if you're there, Julie? Looking to the rest of the members at the moment, I'm afraid I can't hear Julie. Ian?
Chair, if I may, it looks as though Julie's unfortunately experiencing difficulty joining the meeting. Her statement was essentially around the issue of arguing the case for free travel for young people on buses. It has been published on the website, so I don't know if you wish to move on, given that Julie doesn't appear to be able to join us at the moment.
I'll give her one last chance, but as I say, we do seem to be having a technical difficulty connecting with her. We've been successful with everybody else. But members, if you're happy, I would suggest therefore that we move on. I'm sorry we weren't able to hear from Julie, but in that case, please, the next person on my list is Sam Morris. Ian.
Yes, Sam Morris is in the waiting room. So Suzanne, if you could please let Sam Morris into the meeting. Thank you.
Sam, hello. I can see you now appearing on the screen. At the moment, it looks as though your microphone's on mute. Please, would you try to unmute and just let us know if you're able to talk to us?
Okay, can you hear me okay?
There we are. That looks, I can hear you loud and clear. So again, very welcome to talk to the committee for up to 3 minutes, and we're very pleased to say your time's starting now.
Great stuff, thank you. Yeah, I'd like to deliver this statement on behalf of Extinction Rebellion Bristol. Given the scale and pace of the climate emergency, we expected that WECA would have made more progress on its climate emergency plans. It's disappointing that after nearly a year, we have only a 7-page report which offers no milestones or commitments. Recent experience relating to COVID has shown that unprecedented responses are possible when a crisis is clearly recognised. We are pleased that WECA and Bristol City Council have managed to keep the buses and train services running to allow people to travel in what continues to be a challenging time for all. We also want to say that WECA's proposed developments in public transport and active travel options are very welcome in the JLTP4. It's encouraging to see the authority aspires to align to the National Cycling and Walking Infrastructure Strategy to make cycling and walking the natural choice for shorter journeys. But if promoting and enabling active travel and public transport are the best options to tackle climate change, why does the JLTP4 propose so much road building? It is well documented that increased road building simply leads to more cars on the roads and therefore more pollution, as well as more congestion and more accidents. What we need is huge investment in integrated transport options that enable people to avoid cars. In the face of drastic health and economic impacts of the impending climate crisis, we need to see a rapid shift from individual car journeys to active travel and public transport. WECA needs to drive and facilitate this change. Citizens of the West of England are depending on WECA to get this right. We don't get a second chance at this policy making. Decisions made now will determine how people travel in the region for the next 2 decades. We urge WECA to reassess the road building aspirations outlined in the JLTP4. You must work to provide people with cleaner, greener travel options. Thank you.
Mr. Morris, thank you very much indeed, and appreciate you being able to join us and talk to us. Thank you. In that case, I believe Susan Carter is next on my list, Ian. Do we know?
Yes, and Susan Carter is here, Chair. Suzanne, if you could please let Susan Carter into the meeting. Thank you.
Hello, I can hear a little noise in the background. Could you just let us know if you're there, please?
Are you talking to me, Susan Carter?
Yes, I am. Hello.
Thank you very much.
Very welcome. Lovely
Thank
to
you.
hear you.
Thank
We
you.
have up to 3 minutes and we'll consider the time starting now. Thank you.
Thank you. The Ramblers welcomes the green infrastructure strategy. We would have liked more focus on the importance of green spaces for people and a commitment to making more green spaces accessible. Nonetheless, we hope that the strategy will be adopted. Going forward, we would like the committee to set targets for opening up more wild spaces for people to enjoy and for more green routes linking them for those on foot and on bikes. We would like the Ramblers and other recreational groups to be involved in taking the strategy forward. Thank you very much for letting me into the meeting today. That's all.
Thank you very much, and nice to see you literally at the end there, but that's very kind of you. Thank you for joining us and appreciate you being able to say hi.
Thank you.
Thank you. In that case, Ian, I've got Councillor Fodor as the next person on my list. Can you just check and see if we're all lined up?
Councillor Fodor is here. Suzanne, if you could please let Councillor Fodor into the meeting. Thank you.
Councillor, hello. I can see you on my screen.
Can you hear me now?
Wonderful. Nice to, and I can see you now, so it's nice to see you as well.
Thank you very much.
I'm familiar with the form, but very welcome to ask you to share up to 3 minutes with us.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I'm here to talk about calling for action on the climate emergency, and I'm afraid it's again because we're still calling for action on the climate emergency. Your much delayed climate action plan is still delayed, and I appreciate you've had other pressing priorities, but actually most of the delays seem to have been after the document could have been ready in spring originally, for which preceded the pandemic. Now you've missed a summer deadline and it's going to be October, I gather. So 15 months after the declaration and 15 months closer to the 2030 target to be carbon neutral. For an emergency, 15 months is quite a lot of time to lose. And every delay makes achieving the target harder, as Sir Nicholas Stern said, and more expensive, as he also said. It makes the economic transformation that much harder and more disruptive. All the decisions you're making in the meantime mean you're delaying action, neglecting the issue and making it harder. So I looked at the update report thinking, well, maybe there's action underway. And I asked a question about that. And I was given this short list, which is on, I think it's page 392 of your document. So there's not very much action taking place, and certainly no acceleration in action that we would expect in terms of responding to an emergency. Not enough projects, not enough change. And meanwhile, your billions of investment in road building are pushing emissions in the wrong direction. The gap in the graph on page 395 of your report that you're about to discuss is getting wider, and that doesn't help at all. So the urgent need to respond is as you say, you should be integrating this with the recovery task force, and you should be making things happen right now, not 15 months late and not after all the other decisions. We need a response commensurate with an emergency. The modal shift that's needed is not helped by funding billions into road building and delaying action on cycling and walking, active travel and so on. Building Back Better is being talked about, but your document says you want to be seen as leading the way as a public sector organisation. If that claim bears any relation to your intentions as for people, the authority, and as a reality in terms of what you're delivering, then please accelerate the urgency, start making changes and stop pushing us in the wrong direction. I spent 5 years as the local government sector climate policy advisor, representing the local government association. We wanted things to start then, 20 years ago, from 1997. We've got to 2020 and so little has been done. Please take action, accelerate the progress and stop moving us in the wrong direction. Thanks very much.
Councillor, thank you very much indeed. Again, do welcome you taking the time to come to join us this morning.
You're welcome.
And in that case, please, the final person I have on my list, Ian, is Christina Biggs. So is Christina with us? Ian, do we know if Christina's with us? You're on mute.
Sorry, Chair. Yes, I think Councillor Clive Stevens was actually next, Chair. Sorry.
I beg your pardon. Sorry. Yes, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Stevens. My sincere apologies. I'd prematurely ticked you off my list. So
Councillor Stevens is joining us now. Sorry.
Councillor Stevens, I am sorry. I'd ticked you off by mistake there on my little list in front of me. So you're very welcome. It's nice to see you. Very welcome to talk to the committee for up to 3 minutes. Over to you.
Would you like my statement now?
We've already read your statement. You're very welcome to talk to the committee for
Thank
up to
you.
3 minutes. Sir.
I do hope you're all well. Good to see you. I'm going to talk briefly about your new strategic plan process, the one to take over from the joint spatial plan, your Agenda 21, and specifically in the memorandum of understanding between the 4 local authorities and WECA. At point 3, you say it's going to be a spatial plan with clean and inclusive growth at its heart. Inclusive means for both the rich and for poor. But I've never seen a planning document, a planning policy that includes real inclusivity. So please forgive my sarcasm. Does it mean inclusive so that landowners can earn millions by offering up their land for house building and the price rockets? And you mean inclusive so that affordable houses aren't then offered because guess what? The land price is too high and they're not viable. In Bristol, we have over 10,000 on the waiting list and the population's growing. We need more than that, affordable houses. So for all the nice words in the Memorandum of Understanding, we need a plan that will actually deliver, please. I'd like to hear how you're going to do that. My report on how you could do that will be available in September.
Councillor Stevens, thank you very much. If finished, and we haven't. Oh, there we are. I can see as well. Just wanted to make sure the screen hadn't frozen. Thank you very much indeed. Appreciate you taking the time to come to talk to us. Thank you. And now then, I will try to make sure I'm back to my list because I believe the last person we've got with us is Christina on my list here. And is that the case?
That's right, Chair. So, Suzanne, if you could please admit Christina Biggs to the meeting. Thank you.
Christina, hello. I can see you appearing on our screen. At the moment, your microphone shows it's on mute. So there we are. Thank you. That suggests you can hear me because it's actually just changed.
Hi.
Christina, you're very welcome as always. I think you know the form better than most of us or most of the others. So, you know, you've got up to 3 minutes and we're very welcome to listen to you for that point starting now.
Thanks very much. I've no idea what happened now. It's just, so I'm Christina Biggs from the Friends of Suburban Bristol Railways. We've been campaigning for many years now for local rail. So we're delighted that Metrorail Phase 1 and 2 are definitely going through the pipeline. I think what we'd love to see is with Metrorail Phase 1 and 2, obviously Phase 1A could happen quite quickly. We know you're keen to extend to Westbury first, possibly for political reasons, just so the whole regionally connected, but Severn Beach is desperate for a service. It's only once every 2 hours now. So, you know, wouldn't it be great if we could, you know, get Metro's Phase 1A done as soon as, just as a initial service from Temple Meads to Avonmouth and Severn Beach. We'd also like to see your JLTP4 proposals coming through. For example, Constable Road could go in pretty soon now, as well as Ashley Hill, because we've got Filton Bank done. And we appreciate that Porter's Headline, we've got the DCO, let's just go on with that. This will create jobs. It's something that's been long overdue. Everyone will use rail. It's just something about the British that they will take a train. The train station's there, the timetable's on the internet, visitors use it, you know, people coming in will use it when they wouldn't know where to take a bus from. Obviously you can take cycles on trains. So let's see some guard vans on trains. Coalpit Heath Station, that's not in the JLTP4. We've tried to get you interested in that. So if you could include things like that, and our other suggestions, Chittenden, Long Ashton, Corsham. So we know that Wiltshire want to see Corsham. St Anne's, Salford, all of this can be sorted out with things like passing loops. So it's a bit of extra infrastructure to put in, double track the Severn Beach line to make it more reliable. Let's talk to the port about port access at St Andrew's Gate and just try and sort the Hembury Loop out, because if we have a complete Hembury Loop, you can connect Portway Park and Ride with North Bristol. Let's get Pilning open. Let's just, you know, Pilning, 2 million foot bridge. Pilning, you can get to it from Thornbury, you can get from Sevenside employment. It's a direct line to Wales. It's not a lot of money. Christina. Yeah, it's not a lot of money. And let's be adventurous and minibus the airport from Nails and Mackerel. Just put it in now and see who actually uses it. Rail is just, you know, it's there. Please let's use it. People like rail. Young people use it. It's a no-brainer. Thank you.
Christina, thank you very much. It's nice to see you as always. Appreciate you taking the time to join us. And in that case, Ian, I believe that's all of our statement members. I think we've
yes, Chair, that concludes the public items for today's meeting.
Wonderful. I just wanted to make sure I was nothing had changed since we last spoke. So again, thank you very much to everybody who submitted a statement. Do appreciate you taking the time both to submit statements and come and talk to us. All your comments have been shared and noted, and we will make sure that they relate to the agenda items and be taken account by the committee today. And thank you all again for your time, and please all take care. So we will now move on, if we may please, to item 7, which is a standard item, and it asks if any members have any petitions they wish to submit. I note there are none. Thank you very much. In that case, item 8, delighted to welcome Professor Steve West. I won't make any comments about the background of his Zoom. Said that plenty of the other meetings before, but Steve, thank you very much for coming and joining us, and very welcome if you'd like to talk to the members.
Thank you very much, Tim, and colleagues. Thank you. I'd just like to echo the Mayor's previous comments about just how hard everyone is working and trying to ensure that we come out of a particularly difficult period in lockdown. And I applaud the unitary authorities and businesses and everyone, the whole communities really, pulling together during this very difficult period. And I just want to say one or two words about how the LEP is working and what we're focusing on at the moment. I'm very conscious that the agenda is very long, so I'll keep this very brief. The first thing is that collaboration and partnership working is going to be essential. We know that we've still got shocks to come, and we know that the way in which we need to look at this, of course, is through three lenses really. We have the short-term impact and of course our ability to work through and from a crisis into the start of unlocking. We've got medium term impacts around how we adapt and how we become truly more resilient, and then a longer term one which is about how we begin to renew and reset and ensure that we can grow in an inclusive, green, sustainable way. It's very clear that COVID-19 has hit communities very differently, and we know that the disadvantaged communities are likely to have been impacted much greater than other communities, and the business community is very aware of that. So the LEP has been meeting regularly every 2 weeks, just to ensure that we keep on top of our agenda and make sure that we're hearing the voices from the business community, who obviously have had to take some fairly dramatic measures and now are beginning to think through how to come out of them. What we've done, Chair, as you know, is set up a series of task groups. Those task groups are working against a set of principles for recovery. Those principles, very importantly, set against some scenarios that we have been exploring that best fit our city region. It's very clear that we are likely to see some parts of our economy being hit very hard, and so the focus has been around how do we create new sustainable jobs, how do we ensure that we're supporting green economic recovery, and how do we make sure that those communities that have been hardest hit are supported. We're particularly focused on that skills agenda, as you quite rightly pointed out earlier. We know that young people are communities that will be hit hard. We have graduates leaving our universities, and we have school leavers and college leavers looking now to go into the world of work, and they are going to find it really tough. So a big focus on how can we create new opportunities for them. And we also know that as we're all experiencing at the moment, there is some infrastructure that we are going to have to work hard to get right, not least the digital infrastructures that are required to support not just businesses, but education and communities as we think about how to re-equip and reskill people to gain maybe different employment from that they're already in. So an awful lot of work going on, and the LEP is now beginning to draw those themes together and beginning to look at behavioural changes that perhaps we need to encourage and make, access, of course, to financial support, both in the short and medium term, looking at the labour market and how that might change, and in particular, what new markets might open up and how we reskill, looking at how we adapt workspaces, of course, and a big feature that we've just been listening and discussing, the whole transport infrastructure piece. How do we get people to the right places in efficient ways, given the continuation of the need for us to adapt around COVID-19? And then how do we acknowledge the shifts in productivity that all of our businesses are experiencing at the moment as we learn to do things differently? And then how do we ensure that we're investing in the right things for the long term in terms of recovery? So a huge amount of work. I really do thank colleagues across the business sector and also unitary authorities, public, private sectors coming together to try and support each other. And I also recognise the pressures that unitary authorities are under in terms of their own funding, because I think we have to acknowledge that whilst we're doing all of this work, unfortunately, we may well see increases in unemployment, and that is going to put additional stress and burden on unitary authorities as more people may become more vulnerable. So business acutely aware and wanting to work effectively with the public sector to try and ensure we do the best that we can to not just recover, but recover and then thrive and flourish in the future. So thank you very much.
Steve, thank you very much. So much of the success of our region has been built around how our businesses have been innovative and moved forward in the past. And I know from the work you and I have been doing, our businesses are really, really keen to tackle the challenges we have now. And thank you for the work that you're leading with the LEP in that. So it's very, very welcome. And in that case, please, item 9. I'm delighted to see that Councillor Clark's already with us. Be delighted if you'd like to share any comments.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. So you've you've got the report of our committee meeting on Wednesday. We welcomed a lot of the things in the papers. Just talking about item 11, the COVID response initially. The Regional Economic Task Force, we thought that was a very worthwhile and timely initiative. We'd quite like to see the minutes of that, if that was possible. It wasn't that clear whether those minutes were going to be available to scrutiny, but we would like them to be, please. It was stressed the vital importance of the WECA mayor and other political leaders working together towards economic recovery. And that was mentioned a few times within the committee. Next, item 12, the constitutional amendments. We note the proposals to reduce the numbers of meetings. I mean, as you've been aware, there was an awful lot of papers for this meeting. Presumably, if there was less meetings, there'd probably be more papers, which is, of slight concern. We recognise that as scrutineers, we need to be looking more carefully and in a more organised method at the decision making that's being made within WECA. We already meet between WECA meetings, as you probably know, informally, but we're also going to have moved to smaller groups, smaller committees to mirror the WECA boards. So we've already got transport, which is quite an active group already, but also we're going to have a planning and housing, business skills, and so on. On the constitutional matters, we made a general point was made about the accessibility of meetings, which can be held in private. So, for example, there's mention of the Regional Transport Board, which we couldn't really see why that meeting wasn't a public meeting and felt it should be. Next, item 22, the climate emergency. I have to say that we were very concerned about the progress on this. I'm sure there isn't, but there appears to be a real lack of urgency around the progress of this. As somebody has said in this meeting already, the climate emergency was declared in July last year. We were promised an action report for this meeting, I think. We've had no action report. I think the progress is much too slow. We do recognise, of course, that the COVID recovery planning and the climate emergency planning have to go together, and they impact on each other. Nevertheless, our comment remains that not enough progress has been made on this. Specifically, we made, in our January meeting, we made a number of specific recommendations, which we've had no response to and appear to have been largely ignored. We recommended there should be a climate emergency board, which would consist of the cabinet leads. We said the budget of 250k was entirely inadequate. I think one of the things that a number of us thought is that we would welcome Mayor Bowles if you came to our one of our scrutiny meetings and talk to us about this and other issues. I think that would improve, well, it obviously would improve the communications between us, but I think that would be a worthwhile thing to do. I was going to talk about some consultation issues, but I think Jeff spoke about those. There were some concerns from two members, particularly about consultation. They've already been addressed, really. There was one or two quality issues around the report, and I think again they've been mentioned and picked up. So I think those were the main things. But we would extend a formal invitation, if we could, for you to attend one of our scrutiny meetings and have discussions with us. Thank you.
Clark, thank you very much. I think Kai might like to make a comment, and I think Dina might like to as well. So Kai,
no, Tim, it's okay. I'm happy with what was said, so I don't need to comment anymore. Thank you.
And Dina.
Thank you. I'd just like to apologise firstly for having to turn my video off during the course of this meeting. Partly it's because I've have a problem with the broadband, the width of it. So that's why I've been doing that, but I have been listening. What I wanted to say in response to Councillor Clark's report and the comments he's made is bearing in mind the importance of climate emergency until such a time as there is a separate board, or if there's going to be a separate board. Where do you see this issue actually being scrutinised within the different boards that you're now setting up, or do you actually envisage scrutinising all the papers with an eye on how climate emergency is being addressed in all of those separate groups that you're going to be setting up?
Thank you. Well, under the new constitutional arrangements, I believe it falls to scrutiny to to be examining that issue. And again, as we said in our January report, frankly, I'm not sure we've got the expertise or the resources to be able to do that. I don't think it should be down to a group of interested but non-qualified councillors on a scrutiny commission to be looking at that issue, which is one of the very reasons why we suggested there needs to be a board of some sort, a climate emergency board, because we know, of course, that the authorities have got people within them who are responsible for the climate issues. We say they should be brought together at a regional level, at a WECA level, to consider WECA's progress and WECA's planning, and to make sure that the wheel isn't being reinvented.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Tina, thank you very much. And Stephen, thank you very much. And I do appreciate your time and the work of all of your colleagues. So thank you very much indeed. And in that case, please, we will just move on now to item 10, comments from the combined authority boards. And just a reminder that we have 4 boards that respectively deal with planning and housing, transport, business and skills. And they're attended by the relevant cabinet member executive portfolio holders from across each of our constituent authorities. Specific comments from these boards about items on today's agenda have been circulated, and I know that my colleagues here will take those into consideration as we go through the agenda. So thank you very much to everybody who works on our boards and for all the officers from both our authorities and from within the combined authority who do so much work to support those. And in that case, please, we will now move on to item 11, which is an update on the response on the COVID-19 pandemic. And this very much sets the context for much of today's meeting and provides an update for members on the progress made in responding to the pandemic. The report highlights several things, sets out actions taken by the combined authority and our LEP since lockdown began. This, of course, is in addition to the actions being taken by each of our local authorities. The report also includes details about essential emergency decisions being taken by the combined authorities chief executive in consultation with myself during the very early stages of lockdown, to ensure that we had certainty about funding for our adult education budget providers and our bus operators as well, to ensure that we were able to release funding there that wasn't going to be put at jeopardy during the pandemic. It also sets out the details of the financial impact of COVID-19 on the combined authority and on our unitary authorities. And I know Steve touched on that earlier. An update's also included on the work of the Regional Economic Recovery Task Force, which I established in response to a request from the Prime Minister in order to lead the response for the pandemic at a regional level. Huge amount of work going on with many people in that space. I really welcome the enthusiasm which so many people have come together to work collectively in that space. And the work on the recovery will, of course, dominate our agenda for many months ahead. So we are reviewing priorities through a liaison with our partners, and this includes refocusing the deliverability of and the priorities within the current £350 million investment programme in response to the COVID-19 emergency. There are no actual decisions to be taken on this report. We are being asked to note them, but I am keen just to see if any of our members would like to make any comments about the report. So I'd like to run round in turn as I can see you on our screens. Toby, was there any comment you'd like to make?
Chair, it was just to thank officers, both within the combined authority and within our own respective unitary authorities, for the exceptionally hard work that they've put in over a very difficult few months to work with our businesses and voluntary and community groups and various others in order to meet the challenge of the initial crisis response to COVID, but also then the work that is going into ensuring that we're able to bounce back as a region, economically, socially, and environmentally as quickly as possible.
Toby, thank you very much. Don, very keen to hear any comments from you, because this is work we're doing across all 4 of the authorities.
No, I'd like to echo Toby's comments about the thanks for all the very hard work that's been done by officers. And I think the other thing is the wider communities that come together within this, both we expressed about business, but also that all the community groups that have sprung up from nothing, and the work they've done has been absolutely amazing, particularly looking after some of the most vulnerable people. And this is going to continue moving forward, I imagine, for several months, if not years. So thank you all for doing that as well.
Don, thank you very much. As I can see you on my screen, Kai, was there anything you'd like to comment on at this stage?
No, just to say we welcome the report. Obviously, I've been working closely with you on the public transport response as well, which has obviously been very, very welcome in the short term. Obviously, we've got the £5 million in the report that we're due to come to shortly. Clearly, that's not enough, is it? And we want to work with you closely to try and get as much support to the business sector in Bristol as possible. And it's good that we've also recognised the sectors that might struggle a bit more than others, the cultural and the tourism sector. So we welcome the sort of additional references to them as well. Thank you.
Kai, thank you very much. And Dina, any comments you'd like to make at this stage on this report?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Like everyone else, obviously, I'd like to also thank staff and also the communities. Have all gone above and beyond to help us in all of our authorities provide the support that is necessary, not just to businesses, but also to those that are quite vulnerable. And I think that we should. I think we should thank them for doing that. I think it's important to recognise as well, when we're talking about the economic or recovery piece, that we stress that we're not aiming for exactly the same as was before, that we're actually looking to see what we can have learnt and build that into what will be the new normal of the future. So obviously, particularly of interest, I suppose, is around our response and what we do about the climate emergency. So yes, I too support this paper and will be happy to note it.
Dina, thank you very much. And Steve, was there anything you'd like to add around this paper?
No, welcome it. Thank you, Chair. Now's the time to come together. We've got a lot to do.
Perfect. Thank you very much indeed. And therefore, for the record, we duly note the recommendations as shown. So thank you very much for that. And as everyone's echoed, all the incredible work that's taking place within our councils and our communities. So item 12 is an update to the constitution item. Due to COVID-19 situation, we haven't been dealing today with the usual annual business. report. So nevertheless, it's really important, please, that we just highlight some proposed updates to the Constitution, which we're keen to progress, including updates to the committee and board terms of references to reflect climate emergency, some adjustments to delegations to officers, including specific delegations required to reflect the transport functions that are now being carried out by the combined authority, but which will also help ensure that the swift decision making can be expedited in the transport space as lockdown restrictions ease. We're also asked to approve the combined authority's pay policy statement. I'd just like to state at this stage that the authority is committed to ensuring the ratio between the highest and lowest paid employee is never greater than 10 to 1. And I welcome the fact that currently the ratio is the ratio of the highest paid employer to the lowest is 6.4 to 1. Very happy to move the recommendations as set out in the published report. I ask for a seconder, please, if someone would like to indicate.
I'm happy to second, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'd now just like to open the paper up for comments, please. Perhaps this time, if we can start in reverse order as I see you. Perhaps Dina, would you like to make any comments to start with?
Yes, thank you. Obviously, what I am particularly pleased to see is the change and specific references now to climate emergency responsibilities, particularly around the overview and scrutiny, including particular wording, which is to provide advice and challenge on policy and programme delivery to ensure that the region will meet its climate commitments. And I wondered whether it would be worth exploring exactly what we mean by provide advice, because I think that actually picks up the point that was raised by Stephen Clark around where experts fit into this. So I would say that it would be very helpful, I think, to maybe have that discussion with scrutiny about how expert advice is actually input into their work, as well as obviously across the other boards of WECA.
Thank you. Kai.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Just a point I want to make on the advisory boards. There's been a little bit of concern from members that sit on the transport board, and I don't know if it's the same on the other boards, about the need to maybe professionalise our processes a bit more and the lateness of documents being sent to us. Because there's been a number of instances of documents being sent to us sort of with a day's notice or a couple of days' notice, when we're used to working within our own authorities with proper notices on documents getting to you 7 days and things like that. So I just think for us to be effective, that we really need to up our game on that, so we can properly read and consider documents going forward. And I think there's a joint letter that's been sent to you from the Transport Board about that. It's not party political, but it's just about good governance, I think, and good processes. So if we can work on that and professionalise that further, and also allow members on the advisory board to have some say on what is discussed at the advisory boards as well. Obviously, we don't want to take over the agenda, but there may be items that we feel need a bit more scrutiny that we can request come to us as well. So it's just that area really that I want to highlight to you.
Okay, thank you, and yes, duly noted, and yes, we're looking at that already. So important about how all those officers feed into those reports. So very much agree with you on that space. Toby.
Chair, thank you. I just wanted to sort of echo some of the comments that have been made already around being explicit around the roles of the advisory boards and for overview and scrutiny to help us to deliver our region's climate commitments. I'm very clear that with our response to the climate emergency needs to be a thread that runs through everything that we do, and it shouldn't be a bolt-on. So I'm not a fan of having a separate climate emergency board. I think that actually our existing advisory boards and committees, should make sure that the climate emergency, is a thread that runs through all of their discussions, which of course then flow through to the advice that they give to us as the decision makers on the combined authority. The other point I just wanted to make as well was, obviously we have made a modest reduction to the amount of formal meetings that we have, and I'm no fan of unnecessary meetings. It's just making sure that where there are opportunities where they come up in between meetings and we have to move at pace, that we're not held up by the fact that we've got to wait however many weeks or months for the next available formal committee meeting. We have received I believe all leaders have received a representation from partner organisations in Reboot Southwest, and so it's that importance of being able to move to support initiatives like that, if there is support, to do that without having to wait for the next available formal meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Toby, thank you very much and welcome that. Steve, was there anything you'd like to add to item 12?
No, thank you, Chair. It's fine.
Thank you very much indeed. So in that case, please, we'll now move to the voting. I note that items 1 and 3 have the same voting arrangements. So may I ask the combined authority members to indicate if they're in favour of items 1 and 3 by signalling, just putting your hand in the air, please. Right, I seem to have frozen here. Please may I ask, I think we need to do this through audio then. Please, Toby, Kai, Dina, would you just indicate that you are approving recommendations 1 and 3?
Yeah, I'm in favour, Tim.
Are you going to go around and ask us individually?
Individually, Toby and Dina, please could you record your approval?
I'm supportive of the recommendations.
Thank you. And therefore, for item 2, we have a slightly different voting arrangement there. And again,
do you want me to say that I'm supportive too?
Thank you. Toby's indicated he's supporting all the recommendations. Please, could Kai and Dina just say as much, because I'm having difficulty seeing you in that sense.
Sorry, yeah, I'm in favour of the recommendations, Tim.
Of all recommendations.
As am I, if you're asking me.
Can you just say for all of the recommendations? Thank you. That was the key, to get everybody to say all of the recommendations, as indeed I am, where I am relevant to the vote. Thank you. In that case, please, can we now move on to item 13? And this report presents the revenue budget financial outturn information for the combined authority and the mayoral budget for the financial year 2019-20. This is based on data for the period between April 2019 to March 2020. Lots of good points in here. Just 1 or 2 I'll highlight, please, if I may. The Appendix 1 sets out the mayoral fund forecast outturn revenue position for the financial year, which overall is £762,000 lower than the original budget due to the rephasing of the spend on the Bristol Temple Meads Master Plan project during the year. And as this project is funded by grants which are carried forward, the net position remains balanced. Appendix 2 details the estimated outturn revenue positions for the financial year, which overall is a net surplus of 551,000 due to higher than budgeted returns on investment. There is very little impact from COVID-19 pandemics on the authority's management accounts for 1920. However, inevitably there will be an impact on 2021 revenue budgets as our activity continues to be reprioritised and refocused in supporting economic recovery. We feel the achievability of business rates growth targets is a particular concern, which will directly impact on a significant proportion of the combined authority's core operating revenues. that activity and corresponding budgets will accordingly be kept under close review over the coming months. So I'm very happy to move the recommendations there. Please may I ask one of our colleagues to indicate that they would be happy to second.
Sorry, can you see my hand?
Thank you, Dina. The record perfect. And just before we move on to the voting, please can I ask if you have any comments, please? So, Toby.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just wanted to welcome the underspend and to thank officers for their work in managing that. Obviously, the transferring that into our reserves will obviously be very important for how we go about funding our response to COVID and our other priorities moving forward. So just wanted to welcome that. Thank you.
Perfect. Kai, Dina, anything you'd like to comment?
No, I'd just like to echo what Toby has said about the unspend.
Thank you. Kai, anything particularly you'd like
to
comment?
No comment on this. I'm happy with the report.
Perfect. Thank you very much. We are asked for two of the points to note. Colleagues, given the slight challenge we had a little earlier in me trying to get to either indicate by raising hands, perhaps if members and Shazia as our legal are happy, perhaps would it be acceptable in this instance to ask if any members voting here are not in favour of any of the items recommendations? Is that acceptable, Shazia?
It is, yes.
Thank you. So members, if we're clear there, please indicate if you are against any of the recommendations. If you don't indicate, we will assume that you're all in favour. I see no one saying they're against. Steve, I'm awfully sorry. I didn't ask you if you had any comments on that one, were you? Thank you. Sorry, I saw you click up again. So item 14 is the Treasury Management Outturn Report. Always got a really exciting title there. But the report essentially sets out a review of performance against the Treasury management points. There's an awful lot of information that goes into there. Lots of work takes place between financial officers in the combined authority and across all of the authorities. So again, I'm very grateful to them on that. I'm really keen, I mean, whilst there are no actual decisions to be taken on this report, again, we are asked to formally note, but would be very keen just to see if any members have any comments. So Tony, Kai, Dina and Steve, would you like to comment at all on this? No, thank you very much then.
Tim, sorry, apologies. I did put my hand up, but I'll also just jump in as well. It was just to make a very brief comment, which was just to welcome in particular recommendation 3. And that short-term loan facility and that flexible sort of financial assistance that that we're working together on between the combined authority and the unitaries. It's no secret that we do have significant financial challenges, but again, because of our decision to create the combined authority, that means that that we do have this additional tool in our armory to be able to assist with how we manage the current situation. So just wanted to welcome that. Thank you.
Toby, thank you very much. And I think it is a really key point in showing how we're trying to work with our authorities, recognising the challenges that you face at the moment. So thank you for highlighting that. We have been asked to duly note, and unless anybody indicates differently, I'll consider that we are formally noting those for the record. Thank you very much indeed. Item 15 now is the latest investment fund report. And just again to highlight that through discussions with our combined authority members, very careful consideration has been given to the deliverability of and the priorities within our current £350 million investment programme, especially in response to COVID-19. And this will be an ongoing process, and further updates will be provided through each committee cycle. In terms of the specific proposal in today's report, I'd particularly like to highlight the degree of financial headroom that we have identified from a review of the current programme. And as a result, this report proposes an allocation of £5 million to support the COVID-19 economic recovery, to be advised by the Regional Economic Recovery Task Force, and that we award £2 million to develop the spatial development strategy and the local transport evidence plan, which is going to be vital as we prepare our future planning strategies. And also an allocation of £300 to enable specific green infrastructure proposals to be taken forward as part of the joint infrastructure strategy, which we'll be considering later in this meeting. One or two other very significant decisions that's part of this. An award of £250,000 for North Cambridgeshire strategic master planning. This follows previous awards to enable the master planning of the Yate urban living opportunity area and the North Fringe of Bristol and of Southwest Bristol. An award of £300,000 to support the development of the iStart project, a new facility on Bath College's city centre campus. An award of £174,000 to support continuing and extending the Careers Hub, an enterprise advisor network in the 2021 academic year. Package of measures to support cycling and walking, through allocating £3 million from the opportunities and challenges allocation to underwrite the emergency active travel funding measures that are currently being carried out across our authorities. And this will enable our council colleagues to mobilise those short-term measures to improve cycling, walking and the required social distancing in advance of us receiving funding from government. And very significantly, an allocation of an additional £10 million from the investment fund for permanent cycling and walking infrastructure to ensure that we continue to promote this much needed modal shift in the area. But members, I'm very happy to move those recommendations. May I ask for a seconder, please? Dina, thank you very much. So Dina, I'm now very keen to invite everybody to make any comments to this report. Dina, perhaps you'd like to start on this.
Thank you. Yes, I'm happy to support this. What I do want, particularly about the £3 million to underwrite the DfT's emergency active travel funding, this was announced some time ago. I think, certainly the public, our residents have had expectations raised. And if we didn't have this money coming, being underwritten by WECA, then we wouldn't be able to deliver what we have already been able to deliver around social distancing measures. So what I would like to know is there any news yet from DfT about when the money that they announced will be arriving to repay WECA? And then my second point that I wanted to raise is what I would have liked to have done is to have put, when we're talking about the £10 million for walking and cycling infrastructure, at least £10 million. But that isn't a formal an amendment, it's just a wish.
So Malcolm's indicating and David's gone off mute. So very, very briefly, Dina's asked a direct question about DfT funding. It was a very direct question. I think it was, is there any news? I suggest a very, very direct answer.
Do you want me to answer, Malcolm?
Yeah, go on, David. Yeah.
So we spoke to DfT yesterday, and the indication that we've got is that decision and announcement will be made by the end of June. So Tuesday the 30th or Monday the 29th, we believe.
I hope it's made in such a way that it doesn't appear to be a second amount of money.
I'm afraid to say there will be two tranches. So tranche one will be what is announced at the end of June, and then tranche two, we believe, towards the end of July.
David, thank you very much. But the important thing I think we're just highlighting is that our commitment from the Combined Authority to make sure that these projects are underwritten is seeing things happen now.
Thank you. That's the point. Yes.
Thank you very much indeed. Looking backwards on my screen, Kai, any comments you'd like to make around this report, please?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Obviously, welcome the money outlined in this report around the cycling and walking, and the £5 million recovery money as well. Obviously, clearly the problem's bigger than £5 million, so we're more than willing to work with you in terms of trying to get a bit more money out of government. I guess I'm trying to maybe seek an assurance around this, because often it's the sort of sexier sectors of the economy that maybe get the focus, the high tech, the high skill, and to really get the economy going again and get the spending power back into the economy, we really need to look at the maybe some of the lower skill sectors, retail, hospitality, just to get the economy moving and the spending power circulating. So I was just seeking some assurance that we will be focusing on a sort of a multitude of sectors, and especially some of the sectors that support the high street, and obviously would be more likely to get the economy moving again.
Kai, thank you very much. I'll just very, very briefly comment on that, if I may. I'm sure you're aware that the Regional Economic Recovery Task Force includes specific sector groups, both for retail and for visitor and tourism market. So yes, those sectors are very, very much on our regional radar. But I think there's also something else for us all just to reflect on, the investment that we'd already put into our high streets funds. So I think there's a lot of things WECA are doing with our council that we can incorporate into this, but appreciate your comments. Thank you. Toby.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, lots to welcome in this report. I'm particularly pleased to see that obviously later on in the agenda we'll be considering our green infrastructure strategy, but funding is being set aside here in the investment fund reports to enable us to actually sort of get on and deliver some schemes and to show some ambition around moving at pace with improving our green infrastructure, nature recovery and biodiversity that is such a critical element of our climate emergency response. I will labour the point about the climate emergency being that thread that runs through everything that we do. So actually recognising that the allocation of funding for our economic recovery task force and the importance of a green recovery as part of that. But also the funding that is here to enable us to progress the SDS and our local plans. Again, making sure that our future growth plans make sure that we are leaving our environment and climate in a better position to where we inherit it from. I think it was a point that I raised on the constitutional update just around making sure that we are able to move forward outside of meetings but the importance of doing that transparently and we have had an appeal from a number of our partner organizations who are involved in Reboot West, which obviously is something that all four of the unitary authorities have worked on through its initial phase. Extraordinarily successful outcomes in how we support our care levers into sustainable employment and skills opportunities. We talk about the priorities that we have within not just our local industrial strategy, but also our employment and skills plan when we talk about enabling all young people to achieve their potential and to support them and the economy's needs around skills. So I would want to make sure that we are able to progress discussions outside of today's meeting on how we can look to support Reboot West, because I understand that the deadlines will happen before our next meeting. So yeah, just like to, for the sake of transparency, to make clear that I'd like to have those discussions outside of today. And I think then just my final point, Chair, was just around the importance of the work that we're doing around our high streets and around walking and cycling, to support social distancing. I think that to a large extent, we and government can say what we like around easing lockdown restrictions and reducing social distances. But I think we've got to recognise that actually, if we're looking at figures from the Office for National Statistics, only a third of people feel safe or very safe to go out and about. And actually, the measures that we are introducing in our high streets and actually in various other of our public spaces is about improving confidence and to give confidence for all of our residents that they are able to go out and about, to support local traders, to go about their daily business, and just the importance of that to our economic recovery. So I wouldn't want that the economic importance of these measures to be lost in that. That was all I had to say, Chair. Thank you.
Toby, thank you very much. Steve, I'd really keen if you had any comments. That there's work in here around our Careers Hub Enterprise Advisor Network, which really does support an awful lot of young people, especially finding pathways into business, around one or two of those other things. Interested if you had any comments from a business perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think I think you've got a balanced, or what we've got here is a balanced approach to trying to restart the economy again, and actually recognising where are the pressure points going to be, and we know where they are in terms of young people and retail, in particular, trying to find ways of keeping young people engaged and giving them hope. It looks pretty grim through their eyes at the moment, I have to say. And so I think that the work that we're doing around careers and providing advice and guidance is going to be hugely important. We also need to keep a very clear eye on how apprenticeships are going to roll forward, and how businesses are going to need to invest in continuing with apprenticeship schemes, even though they may be under some pressure. The other thing, I think, just final point for me, Chair, is that the behavioural changes that everybody is having to accommodate, I think, are significant. And I agree with the point that Toby made, that part of this is about recognising the risk appetites across our communities are very, very different. So there are some communities where they have huge anxieties and real concern about safety, but there are other big parts of the community where they're at completely the opposite end of the spectrum. So young people are at what in the main, younger people are at one end of a spectrum, and older people and disadvantaged communities and those that have medical conditions that make them more vulnerable, and we know that the BAME communities in particular are also more vulnerable. So we're trying to balance, I think, quite a complex set of dynamics. And therefore we need to work out, how do we keep our communities coherent, that we don't start to see divisions occurring because of those different risk appetites and the way in which we're moving forward. And I just think we just need to be alive to that, because unlocking in many ways is more complicated than lockdown, because all of those things are going to come out. Final point from me is, I do think that whilst we're dealing with the immediate, which is absolutely right that we do have to think hard about how we revision and reimagine the high streets, because I think there's been a fundamental shift and that will continue. So how we rethink what we want our high streets to be and do and deliver, and how they engage with them in a very different way, is something fundamental that we're going to have to think through.
Steve, thank you very much indeed, and appreciate broadening out that point, which is very, very welcome. So, members, combined authority, we are asked to vote on 11 recommendations. They all have the same voting arrangement. So, Shazia, again, from your earlier comment, what I'm proposing, members, is please would you indicate if you are not in favour of any of those 11 recommendations. If I don't see that, we take it that you are. So please indicate now if you are not. Shazia, are you content from how that worked, that we
Yes,
can
Mayor.
record that everybody is in favour of those recommendations?
The voting intention is clear, so that's fine for the minutes and for YouTube.
Perfect, thank you very much indeed. In that case, we now move on to item 16, making sure I'm ticking things off properly. Yep. COVID-19 bus network recovery. And this report presents the current position on bus network recovery following the relaxation of the COVID-19 lockdown restrictions, which of course did saw further relaxation measures coming into effect earlier this week. Some key points just to highlight quickly. The report provides a lot of detail of the work taking place around funding sources for bus services, concessionary travel reimbursement, support for community transport, the impact of social distancing on bus capacity, and the latest position on bus network restart and recovery. And we're asked today to approve the continuation of concessionary fare reimbursement payments to bus operators at pre-COVID levels for a further 3 months to the end of September 2020. I think this is an absolutely vital measure in terms of helping our bus services to operate as we move forward through the next stages of lockdown and release. And at this point in time, we cannot have we know we haven't got certainty around the exact pace and extent of further release from lockdown restrictions. So it's important that we have a plan to recover the bus network. But of course, this is inevitably going to be work in progress given what we have just said. So this report sets out the key issues and the steps being taken to support the recovery of the bus network. Further reports will be brought through to the committee via the Transport Board as we move forward. For the record, I'm very happy to note the recommendations as set out. Technically ask for a seconder, please, for that. Very happy if one of you would like to raise your hands. Thank you, Toby. Members, is there anything you'd like to comment on regarding this report, please? Toby, perhaps if you'd like to start.
Chair, yeah, thank you for that. I just wanted to welcome the report, and I think this is a really important opportunity as we move into a sort of COVID-19 recovery phase, that we do explore that longer term modal shift to active modes of transport, and to work with the bus operators to recover the position of what had been and steadily increasing bus patronage that we had in the west of England. I think one of the speakers we had earlier was quoting the national figure, but actually our local and regional figure had been bucking the trend for some time, and obviously it's deeply disappointing that potentially all of that progress has been undone by the events of the past few months. I think it's just really important as we move forward to work with our bus operators on future highway interventions, and to understand their needs and what they think the needs of their customers are, so that we are able to support that future return to bus travel as speedily as possible. Thank you.
Toby, thank you very much. Kai, that's an area you've got a huge great interest in. Any thoughts you'd like to share?
Yeah, obviously I'm a big fan of the buses, and it's something in Bristol that we're continually supporting in terms of bus priority measures, and we firmly believe in buses, and Toby's right to point out that obviously that statement earlier was probably quoting the national figures, not the local figures, where we've cut the trend. It's just I've got a couple of concerns about the long term, because obviously the government have recognised that buses are important and vital public services. Otherwise, they wouldn't have committed money to keep them going during the COVID-19 crisis. And I think it's also the view of the mayor in Bristol that, given the amount of public support that's gone in to prop up a privatised industry, going forward, that model's got to change. And I'm not saying, this could be one of the options that we explore locally, but we certainly support a public stake at the very least in the local bus company. But I think the model that has existed needs to change, and I think given the levels of public investment that's gone in, and I know what you'll say, Tim, the money's gone in to support individual services, but I think most members of the public will see it as public investment propping up a private company that otherwise would have probably gone under without that investment. So I think we definitely need to be lobbying government on the fact that situation needs to change, and for that public investment that's gone in, the ownership structure of how buses operate in the area has to change, and the deregulation hasn't worked. And in my view. The other point to mention is that obviously we've got social distancing at the moment, and chatting to James Freeman of First Group, obviously the capacity of the buses that we've got severely limited. That's been great at the moment because the demand is massively reduced, but it's steadily growing. I think at one point it was 9% of use in comparison to where it should be, and I think we're growing, and it's getting up to about 18%. But the actual capacity of the network is around 24%, and even if social distancing goes down to 1 metre, that doesn't really help the capacity issues on the buses. So we're going to reach a ceiling soon, where that patronage level is going to recover up to a level above that point, but we don't have the capacity to deal with that. So I think we really need to start to think about how we're going to deal with that scenario. I know we're trying to promote the alternative cycling and walking, and I welcome the investment in that, but there's definitely an issue that we need to examine, and how we're going to deal with that when we get to that 24% capacity issue. So hopefully officers are, well, I know they're aware of it, but we definitely need to give that some serious thinking, because we're going to reach that point very soon.
Thank you very much. And just before I come to Dina and Steve, I'll just very, very briefly, if I may, I agree with much of what you have said. And I would just refer you back to the fact that I was representing our regional's interest on the House of Commons Transport Select Committee earlier this week, and making many comments that were in line with the points you've raised. But also, I know how hard Peter Mann and the rest of our transport team are working in their daily contacts with the operators, considering what happens as capacity increases, and we know people are looking at use of other vehicles, other drivers, and so on. So lots happening in that space. Thank you for your point. Dina, anything you'd like to add at this stage?
Thank you. I think we'll all appreciate how extremely challenging the last few months have been for bus operators, and I think we should thank them for actually endeavouring to continue services, as they could do. Obviously, a lot of the time we'll have all seen buses going by that have perhaps, at best 4 passengers on, but I think it was important to keep the services going, and obviously it's going to be, continue to be very testing for bus operators as they try and keep social distancing measures in place, and try and keep those that might be fearful of using buses as safe as possible. I'd also like to extend those thanks as well to officers who have actually gone above and beyond, and tried to work with our various bus operators to ensure that the concerns that they had were being met as swiftly as possible. My last point actually is around a similar point that Kai was raising, which is, I think the 1985 Transport Act hasn't proven to be especially beneficial, I don't think, to encouraging people to use buses, although bus patronage had started to increase, and it is obviously unfortunate that the pandemic has created a kind of atmosphere where bus usage is now not viewed as so attractive. But I would hope that the Transport Board, and I guess this goes to you, Kai, as well as obviously to my own cabinet members, will give some thought to what changes would be best and would best benefit this region. And obviously that will give something very concrete then for the Mayor to be lobbying for in his conversations with government.
Dina, thank you very much. Steve, clearly buses have always made a very, very important role in people being able to travel to and from work and access other businesses, whether it's retail, hospitality, and all those other things. So I wondered if, from your perspective, you've got any comments here?
Yeah, I think this is one of our biggest challenges, if I'm honest. Again, lockdown simple, unlocking is going to be really tricky, and buses, really, how we can do bus transport as businesses come back in online, and as we expect people to travel into our town centres and city centres. We know how important bus routes are, And the massive challenge, I have to say, is going to be if the universities are recruiting anywhere near the numbers, and the colleges as well. So all of the transport flow for education is going to be a massive difficulty. And I do wonder, Chair, whether or not there's a bit of science that we need to investigate here to look to see whether or not, first of all, whether the universities and colleges, remember what I said about the risk profiles. The risk profiles of younger people are very different from the risk profiles of anybody over 60. So can we start thinking a bit more laterally about potentially working with the bus companies to mitigate the risks for a particular population group, which might increase capacity and might decrease the demand on public routes, if you see what I'm saying. So I'm trying to think differently about what we do, because the consequence of not being able to do this will be way more cars on the road, especially during the winter months, with one person in them. And I just think we've got to face up to some realities here about how we work with government and with transport and with public health to see whether or not we can ease some of this. No quick solutions, but we've got to start thinking a bit differently. And if people are wearing masks and if we've got protocols in place, then maybe we'll have a chance to increase the capacities a bit.
Steve, thank you very much. I appreciate your input there. So members, we item 1 we are asked to note. So if everybody's happy, we will formally note that. Item 2 we are asked to vote on to approve the continuation of the concessionary fare reimbursement programmes as outlined in the recommendation. So going back to Shazier's point earlier, please would any of you indicate if you are not happy or in favour with that recommendation? Shazier, are you happy that no one has done so, that therefore everyone's happy and that passes? Yeah,
that's fine. But is Councillor Savage still on the call? He seems to have disappeared from my list.
I can see him. Yep.
Okay, excellent. Okay, fine. So as long as we can hear him, okay, yep. That's fine. Okay.
Thank you so much. Lovely. In that case, please, item 17, West of England Bus Strategy. This is a report for the Joint Committee to adopt the bus strategy for the region. Lots of work in here. It's a real key document that builds on the public transport delivery options to meet the aims of Joint Local Transport Plan number 4, which was recently approved. And the work stream has been in progress over the last 18 months and has been subject to public consultation between February and March of this year. Clearly, COVID-19 has created a fundamental change in the landscape associated with bus and public transport operations, both nationally and regionally, and this is recognised in the report. We have noted that bus patronage recovery back to pre-lockdown levels will not happen in the realistic short term. We recognise that both regionally and nationally. Due to the ongoing need for social distancing, staff and passenger protection, and also on the way in which different people are going to be returning, hopefully, to that new way of working, as opposed to looking backwards that many of us reflected on. Demand will be rising. We will see more vehicles and drivers be needed to required. Kai's touched on that. We know the work is taking place between officers and our operators around that. So tons more is going on a daily basis. So a lot to think about and consider there. So I'm very happy again to move the recommendations. May I ask for somebody just to second those, please? Don is part of this. Sorry, well, Kai has, I think, just quickly got his hand up before Toby did. But very keen now to open this up to the 4 members of the Joint Committee and to Steve for any comments. So as I can see you now, as we've had a quick shuffle on the screen, Kai, perhaps you'd like to start.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, obviously warmly welcome this strategy. The Transport Board in Bristol, the One City Transport Board, had a good look at this as well, and also warmly welcome it. But obviously, as you point out, you know, this is a piece of work that was developed pre-COVID, and it's sort of unpicking what is still valid and what's gone, you know, gone down the leg side due to that situation. They say we probably should review this in about 18 months' time as well, just to see how it's worked and are there any tweaks we could make or adjustments, that kind of thing. So no, fully welcome this piece of work. There are details that obviously we need to, as local authorities, we need to work out, and I suppose we can touch on that in the next paper. But obviously the ring of park and rides and the M32 park and ride and where that goes is obviously an issue we need to resolve as quickly as we possibly can and get that up and running and operating. And that would certainly help the economy and deal with the pollution issues that we're facing and the congestion issues that we face as well. So we're very keen to get that issue resolved.
Okay, thank you very much. I could look to Dina next, please. Dina, you're on mute.
Sorry, I'm on mute.
Thank you, that's fine.
Yes. So yes, so just to recap what I just said, which you couldn't hear, which was that I you know, broadly support the bus strategy as it is, but I think, you know, I think we would all welcome an opportunity to, you know, have a look at it again and see whether it's actually is doing what we would hope. If there's any areas that have been inadvertently missed, and anything else that is necessary to actually to encourage people from across our collective authorities to use other means of transport that aren't the private car.
Dina, thank you very much. Toby, and then Don, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd also like to welcome this report. I was reading through it, particularly encouraged to see the level of engagement that we had as part of the consultation, almost 2,000 responses, and the fact that there was such clear majority support for the key themes around interchange-based network and a clear majority for more opportunities for a more flexible approach, particularly in our rural areas, as well as support for high quality vehicles and integrated ticketing. The long-term aims for this strategy are right. Obviously recognising that the COVID-19 will give us particular challenges, not just over the coming months, but over the next couple of years as well. But absolutely, that long-term aim is the right one, and I'm pleased to be able to support the report today.
Toby, thank you very much. And Don.
Thank you. Out of the darkness. The yes, I would echo colleagues' comments about the document. I would hope that the funding regime now is going to be different in the idea of people actually recognising the importance of public transport. And I think the speakers that were on earlier in terms of climate emergency recognise the importance of us continuing to promote public transport, and particularly buses, as an existing method of transport, rather than reverting back to the car, which does seem to be being overly defined as to what is the way to get around. Clearly, there are going to be some issues, particularly in the short term, and I'd welcome a review of this relatively quickly in relation to the impact of COVID-19 on social distancing. But I guess, and to perhaps be most controversial of all, that we need to get away from the 1985 Transport Act ethos, the fact that, you know, buses are classed as being a second-rate means of transport, and we as political leaders are going to have to be seen to be using public transport, and that does include buses and not just trains. So I think if we're going to expect other people to adopt the strategy, they'll say, where are we? And I know that's not a universally popular statement to make, but you know, when we make a journey to a city centre meeting, we should be using public transport as our key driver, if you'll pardon the pun, rather than anything else. So very supportive. Let's get on with it. Thank you.
Don, thank you. Just before I come to Steve, we've all had discussions at WECA about actually probably now in the virtual world and the way we've reacted in the last few months of not necessarily coming to so many meetings physically like that. So I think there's lots we can take on board on that space. I can see Steve smiling up there in the, well, I won't say in the clouds, in the gods. So Steve, some thoughts, please.
So I very much welcome the report. I think that it's the beginning, it's nowhere near the end. It's giving us a direction to move in, and we mustn't get derailed by the immediate obvious challenges. There is more work to be done around how we develop a mass rapid transport infrastructure, and buses, yes, of course, are part of it, but they're not the only thing that we need to be considering, because in the end, we are going to have to work hard to shift people's mindsets, really, in terms of ensuring that what we've got is clean, efficient, reliable, effective mass transport infrastructure, to encourage them to not use their cars and vehicles. And that's the big challenge for all big cities. And we've heard earlier today that there are lots of options that are available. Of course, they require funding, but they also require quite a lot of nudge to get the communities to move in a particular direction. And like you, Tim, I would be very happy if I never ever have to get on a train to go to London for a meeting for an hour again. So there is we've learned how to use some technologies that can be effective and efficient, and will do a lot to improve climate and probably our own sanity as well if we use it correctly. So welcome this, but it's the beginning, not the end.
Steve, thank you very much indeed. And members, we are, as the Combined Authority members, asked to formally note, as all of us here, we are asked to note recommendations 2, 3 and 4, but we are formally asked to vote on 2 of them. So again, if Shazia is happy from a technical and legal perspective, on those items 1 and 5, may I ask you to indicate if you are against those recommendations? Shazia, I note no one is indicating they are against. Again, are you happy, therefore, that we can show that those recommendations are approved?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. In that case, please, item 18, our bus infrastructure investment paper. Bearing in mind the context of the previous items, some of the previous items, this seeks approval for various measures to support bus infrastructure development. We know that our regional success in bucking the national trends in terms of bus usage has been, in so many cases, due to investment in bus infrastructure. And it really highlights funding opportunities that are available for us to take through to the Department of Transport. It also summarises progress on the bus infrastructure development, including park and rides, and I make the point because we've referenced them on several occasions. Park and rides, the M32 corridor study, bus priority measures, updates on mass transit. Again, we've all recognised that is important for our future planning, and of course the Bath Transport Study. And the report also highlights proposed priorities for bus corridors, split into 2 phases based on deliverability. Phase 1 includes assessing and taking forward interventions, including the A4 Bath Road, Bristol to Bath Strategic Corridor, the A4018, A37 First Route number 2, and the Bristol City Centre connections, A38 North connecting Thornbury and Bristol City Centre, of course, work around the city centre, work around the Ring Road, connections to Yate, and importantly, the A37 South connecting Bristol into North East Somerset and Midsummer Norton. So members, lots going on in that space, really important paper for us. I'm very happy to move the recommendations set out in the published report, noting that recommendation 4 is for noting only. So may I ask one of you to formally indicate if you'd like to second those? Thank you, Kai, seconding. Thank you so much indeed. Members, please, would like to open this up for discussions. Kai, was there anything you'd like to start with?
Thanks, Tim. Again, there's a positive report. Obviously, some very important pieces of work in there. The sort of continued commitment to the mass transit and the mass transit work. The A4 corridor, which is very important, obviously, for us in Bristol and also Baines as well. But also just like to highlight the work going on at the moment around the city centre and our COVID response in terms of closing Bristol Bridge and Baldwin Street to free traffic. There'll be a massive positive benefit to the public transport system of doing that, because obviously we want to take out traffic from the city centre that really should be using more appropriate roads. And given the capacity issue that we've got with buses at the moment, the quicker they get around the route, the less of them that we need. So it's obviously a vital piece of work in terms of helping us with that capacity issue. And it's one of the pieces of work that maybe it may have been done 4 or 5 years, 6 years maybe down the line, but we've looked at it and decided to bring it forward to assist us with the current situation. And obviously you'll know, Tim, that a lot, most of the bus routes in Bristol go through the city centre, so it will benefit a huge number of the routes in terms of the frequency and reliability. And the combined authorities' continued support on that and support in terms of dealing with our funding requests around that is obviously welcomed, and we hope that continues.
Kai, thank you very much. Toby, any comments, please?
Just to welcome the reports. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy. Yeah, I'd echo comments that have already been made, and don't have anything new to say.
Thank you, Dina. There's specific routes there, really important to Bath and North East Somerset. Was there anything else you'd like to add at this stage?
Absolutely. I think what I wanted to also add was a couple of other comments as well. Obviously, I support the creation and funding of the Bristol to Bath Strategic Corridor Programme. But there was probably about 3, 4 issues actually, I think are also other concerns. One is, although we broadly support park and rides, particularly, along the lines of keeping cars off the road, I think we would also like to add that it's important these park and rides are in an appropriate location and actually serve the needs of commuters, and that they have been properly identified that they are for that sort of purpose. I think our experience from a few years ago, where discussions about an inappropriate park and ride, would mean that I would urge caution to just throwing park and rides around in a sort of very liberal, non-thought out manner. And so I would say about rural buses, I think these remain a concern, and it is obviously, as an authority, disappointing that we weren't able to submit a bid for the Rural Mobility Fund because we didn't have the staff to do so. So I think that's something that, as an authority, it would be, as a combined authority, it would be useful to find ways around. And then lastly, I think we need to recognise there will be, particularly in some places, particularly, sort of the narrow streets of cities and towns, there's going to be conflicts in the use of road space between buses, walking and cycling, and that, will need to be resolved locally. But, with all of those sort of additional comments in place, I'm happy to support this paper.
Dina, thank you very much. Don, very keen to see if you had any thoughts or comments on this.
Well, as ever, supportive, I think, around the public transport network improvement. I mean, 2 things really. One is, I can't see it specifically, and it's probably hidden in the detail, but I do think we need to improve information flows, particularly to passengers, because one of the biggest problems with people getting on and off buses is knowing where they're going to be and are they running to time. So certainly the improvements to that, bear in mind technology, need to be at the forefront of getting people onto buses. The other thing which does worry me, and it's all very nebulous at the moment, is this rather, I don't know, unpleasant perhaps is not the right word, but this green number plates business, in that suddenly rich people who can afford electric cars, because they're very, very expensive, are going to get some form of perk for using them. Now, I'd be very, very disappointed if in any way we prevented buses from flowing freely by having electric cars in bus lanes, slowing them down, because the whole point of this is the modal shift out of the car of any description whatsoever onto public transport, which is a far more efficient way of moving people around. So I hope we won't be enticed to give the rich the perk for their electric cars, when we should be getting the perk for all to get on decent public transport.
Don, thank you very much. Steve, I'm not going to ask you specifically to comment on electric vehicles, but I just wondered if you had any broader comments around this paper.
No, I welcome the paper again. I think we, again, for the longer term, absolutely the right thing to do. In the short term, park and rides are going to be a real challenge, because you won't be able to get people out of a park and ride because of the social distancing issues on mass transport. So we're going to have to work with the communities and the public to try and ensure that we don't lose the gains that we've made over the next period because we are unable to be efficient and effective. And we're investing in these sorts of areas for the longer term. So there's a bit of a narrative and a comms piece here, which I think is really, really important, because otherwise we're going to get ourselves into a real pickle very, very quickly.
Steve, thank you very much. So I would like us to address the recommendations. Firstly, all of us as the Joint Committee are asked to note, the Combined Authority members have been asked to note item 4, but we are asked to vote on the Combined Authority membership on the specific recommendations 1, 2, 3 and 5. So as per the previous arrangements, please would WECA committee members indicate if they are not in favour of any of those recommendations. Shazia, I note that nobody is indicating thus, so are you content that that is process followed appropriately?
Yes, very clear.
Perfect. Thank you very much indeed. So item 19. So this is the West of England Local Cycling, Walking and Infrastructure Plan. It's asking us as a joint committee to adopt a plan for the region. Some very important points that need to be made here, please, that this plan is, whilst it's a sub-regional plan, aim is to identify priority routes for investment. And the purpose of those investments is to improve those existing routes that are in place. This has been created following a very specific and defined methodology that was set to us by the Department for Transport. And this plan is a technical document. It is not the regional cycling and walking strategy in its entirety, and it's not intended to constitute the totality of our region's approach. It's also really important, please, to be aware of this context and also bear in mind the decision we've taken at this meeting through the investment fund report to advance £10 million of additional capital funding for cycling and walking infrastructure. That said, turning to the consultation that took place on the plan, the report highlights good levels of support for a number of the key principles, such as promoting and supporting cycling and walking within the region, and support for the reallocation of road space in favour of cycling and walking, and an aspiration to see more investment in cycling and walking across the region. And I know those are points being made by many people here on the committees today. And so, yeah, just to stress that all the schemes and improvements detailed in the route plans will be subject to further design and technical work, consultation and funding approvals, and will be designed in line with the Department for Transport's current and future design guidance. An updated version of the latest plan has been circulated and published in response to points raised in the public forum and by members. And I just wanted to absolutely emphasise that it's our very clear expectation that, as we've said earlier on, that members across the authorities feel as though they're consulted in this process. They're really keen, pleased to do that. Before we move to the recommendations, I'd just like to ask Dina, would you like to propose a slight amendment to one of the recommendations?
I would like to propose an amendment. Thank you very much for asking me to. It's a small amendment that I think helps with our ability to support this paper. I have some words that I'd also like to say, but I'll move the amendment first, and then, if I may, come back and say the words I'd like to add. So the amendment I'd like to move is for the end of recommendation 1, and it's these words, which is to add, as a first step in a more detailed local cycling and walking strategy.
Thank you. So, members, I would normally move all of the recommendations as written, but please could we just confirm that all of us welcome the amendment that Dean has just submitted to recommendation 1. I note that no one is saying anything contrary, Shazia, so please can we consider that to be part now of the formal set of recommendations?
Can I suggest maybe if Ian could put the amendment up on the screen so that the public know exactly what we're looking at, or we can do that when you go to the vote?
Suggest we could do it when we go to the vote, perhaps, if that's sensible. It gives everybody an opportunity to talk more. As I say, very happy to move those recommendations with that amendment. Please may I look for a seconder, please? Kai, thank you very much. Members, would you like to discuss or raise any points? Dina, I know you'd like to make some points, and of course we'll be very, very keen to make sure they're added to the minute. Dina, would you like to start?
Thank you very much. So unfortunately, we wouldn't have been able to give this paper an unqualified endorsement because there are a number of omissions that aren't there. There's nothing, for example, around rural cycling, but I do understand that some types of schemes were excluded from the criteria set by the DFT. So bearing in mind the limitations of this as a technical document, we will support the good work that has been undertaken to formulate the LCWIP, as it will enable us to prioritise work and target our ask for investment from DFT to support the work we'd like to do. I understand that DFT regard this current draft as a strong LCWIP, and so this should help us secure more funding and achieve the outcomes that we all want of encouraging more cycling and walking. And obviously, especially for me in Bath and North East Somerset. The analysis has helped us understand the demands for cycling and walking and the ability for certain communities to adjust their travel habits to travel more sustainably in the future. So I just want to also say that the LCWIP by its nature should be a live document, and the delegation to directors to review and make changes to the plans will ensure that the early concepts for route designs can be tailored to fit the needs of our areas and our local communities that the routes serve. I'd also like to recognise that the LCWIP guidance from government was very specific, and this actually caused us some problems, but it required looking at population densities, propensity to cycle and other criteria. And as I said before, this meant that some schemes could not be included in this document. But I do also welcome that LCWIPs will not be the entirety of our ambitions in the region for cycling and walking. And it's important that while we push the DFT for funding to support the proposals that we put forward, we also need to make sure we continue to use other sources of funding to support these wider aspirations, because these are important to our communities. So therefore, I welcome the earlier agreement through the IF investment into cycling and walking measures, and I'm pleased that a range of schemes will be assessed for priority against this funding, not just those schemes that appear in the LCWIP. So, and as I stated then, I hope that that investment is not limited to the £10 million that has been allocated. Thank you.
Dina, thank you very much, and I do appreciate both your comments and your support in this. Thank you. Kai, perhaps any thoughts?
Yeah, just to welcome the documents. It's I think it's been a very valuable piece of work as well, even before it becomes adopted or gets adopted. Obviously, I don't want to preempt taking that decision. I see Shazia looking at me there. But Yeah, I think it's been very useful in terms of our COVID-19 response, because the measures that we've announced in Bristol in terms of pop-up cycling lanes have been based on the work that's been done through the LC WIP process. And obviously the intention there is, if it does prove successful, we'll keep many of those schemes on a permanent basis. And what we've announced so far is only phase 1, and we're looking at the LC WIP to see what else can be brought forward. So I know some cycling campaigners and lobbyists see this as a document that's got like a 10-year lifespan on it, and things will be very slow. But the intention in Bristol is to accelerate as much of it as possible, and we'll be continuing to look at this in terms of our COVID-19 response as the economy unlocks as well. Also, very basically, it's not a perfect document, but it ticks a box and it allows us to bid for funding from government. So it serves a purpose. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Toby, then Don, then Steve, if we may. Toby.
Thank you, Chair. To echo the points that have been raised already, I think it's important just to see this as a part of the walking and cycling jigsaw, and not the whole agenda there. This has been done for a particular defined purpose set by government, and just important to see it in that context. I think it's also important just to see the context of the maps and the as recognizing that those are the locations for focus and for investment that align with this particular defined methodology, and the importance moving forward as the detail of those particular schemes become apparent, the importance of consulting and engaging not just with the local ward members affected, but the wider community. And we are making a specific delegation to the WECA Director of Infrastructure around this, and to stress the importance that from South Gloucestershire of the need to actively consult and engage with those local councillors and communities as we move forward with the detail of this.
Thank you, Toby. Very important points. And Don, any thoughts you'd like to share on us with this?
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, supportive of this concept. I think it ticks a few boxes in terms of action, particularly around climate emergency. Part of the scheme is to get people cycling and walking to places of work, which I think is a very positive piece. Accept all the comments that Dina and Toby have said. And perhaps as the final point, we have had one written statement and one councillor's address concerning the accuracy of the document. So before we do move forward on this, can we just have an assurance that it's going to be proofread and make sure that any errors which have crept in are removed? Because it'd be a dreadful shame to be picked up on minor detail when the greater concept is then perhaps lost. So thank you everybody for the work that's been put into this. We do understand the scope of it, but I think it's a massive positive in terms of taking forward the walking and cycling process within our area. So thank you.
Don, thank you very much. I know David Carter's been with us, and please, this is no reflection on other authorities. As our officers do need to check now those cross-referencing the accuracy with the other councils. So I'm sure David will pick that up, won't you? I can see he's nodding and sticking his thumbs up. Thank you. And Steve, in terms of sort of cycling and walking infrastructure, not just you as a huge employer with thousands of students, but from the bigger business perspective, anything you'd like to reflect on, please?
I think this is very positive, and I'm delighted that assuming that colleagues that are voting do vote it, it gives us a huge opportunity to engage with government to get additional funding into the city region.
Steve, thank you very much indeed. So when we look at what we are asked, as a combined authority, we're all asked to note the actual recommendations for the joint committee, all of us, therefore include recommendations 2 and 3 to note, that we are asked to vote as set out in the papers on recommendations 1, 4 and 5. So to follow our earlier procedure, please would any of those members indicate if they are against any of those recommendations?
So Chair, can we just put the amendment up so that the public can see what we're
I beg your pardon. Thank you. I'm glad you've you reminded me of that. Thank you so much.
There you go. So that's the amended version from what we've published. Otherwise, all of the other recommendations are the same.
Thank you very much for reminding us that we just needed to highlight that. So it's the recommendations that were published, including the agreed amendment there, which I notice has gone, but I trust that will be made public as well in the minutes. But again, just for making sure this process is done correctly, those recommendations, including the amendments, please would members indicate if they are against any of those. Shazia, I recognise from where I'm sat that everybody is therefore in favour. Thank you very much, and I do appreciate the help and support of everybody in that item. Item 20, our strategic rail investment. Again, very, very important in terms of all of our transport commitments. Always been something I know we've got huge support on from many people across the region. So this includes updates and seeks appropriate delegations to enable officers to progress further work to deliver on our commitments, including the Metro West programme, Phase 1A, Severn Beach and Westbury lines, 1B, Portishead lines, Phase 2, Henbury and Yate lines. Metro West GWR rail services and access to Department for Transport funding, important part of this, as indeed is the vital aspect of the delivery of the Temple Meads Eastern Entrance project, going to be huge in terms of unlocking so much potential, not just here in the city centre, but also in terms of the whole region. It also shows that the work the Combined Authority and Network Rail are undertaking to produce a joint 10-year delivery plan and a 25-year strategic outline business case for rail investment in the west of England. And it also emphasises the very welcome, important work that we are doing as a combined authority to take forward and extend the scope of Metro West to Gloucester. I think it's really important in our travel to work plan. Really happy to move those recommendations. Please could I ask perhaps if Don would like to second, because that way he could second both. I beg your pardon, we need a combined authority seconder and then someone to second on behalf of the joint committee.
Thank you.
Could I ask somebody suitably qualified to raise their hand, please? Toby, and if we're happy to second from the combined authority. Don, I don't know if you technically want to second the joint committee one, or are you happy Toby covers both of them? Thank you. We'll take it that Toby seconded on all of those. Members, anything you'd like to add, please? Very keen to get your thoughts on that. So where shall we start? As I can see you at the moment, we'll go Kai, Dina, Toby, Don and Steve. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Obviously, I welcome the investment that's been outlined, and obviously the redevelopment of Temple Meads. The wider package there is going to be very important in terms of when that does happen, in terms of boosting the economy and its role in being an economic stimulant to getting the economy going again. I do, however, have some very grave concerns about rail. I guess it's hearts over head sort of situation, because I guess we all love rail, and it's a great form of transport to be on. It's one of the best ways to get from A to B. But my main concern is that dealing with the climate emergency and the time frame that we've got to deal with it, the time rail takes to deliver is just totally unacceptable in that context. I mean, if you look for example, at the new station on the Severn Beach line at the Park and Ride site, that was envisaged more than 10 years ago. It's been over budget 3 or 4 times, and it's still not been delivered, although we're looking at delivery in the next 18 months or so. So I just don't think, I think we just need to have a real, I suppose it's not a regional issue, it's more of a national issue about how rail gets delivered. It's just not quick enough, it's just not responsive enough. It's the budgeting processes don't seem to be fit for purpose. And when you've got a limited amount of resource to decide how we spend it locally, you have to ask the question, is it the best investment given the climate emergency and given how quickly things have to be delivered? I wish the processes were better, and that I would have greater confidence in rail being delivered. But this the 25-year strategy, what we expect to deliver at the end of that is really what we should be trying to deliver over the next 10 years. So I've got no confidence that if we said we wanted to deliver that over the next 10 years, that it would be done due to all those historical issues around rail delivery, things being over budget, things not being done quickly. And as I said, it's not a regional issue, it's a national issue about how rail gets delivered. I'm sure some of my colleagues on the Zoom call here will probably agree. I think Don would probably agree, given the frustrations around the Portishead rail line and how long that's taken to deliver and how long that's been on the agenda. But unfortunately, rail is not a great investment as it stands at the moment. And as I said, I really love the trains and I wish we could really put a lot more money into rail. But given those concerns, I think we should be looking to put our money elsewhere.
Thank you. Dina, any thoughts?
Well, perhaps I'm feeling slightly more positive about this. You know, I welcome the investment in rail. You know, and both cabinet members are supportive of this. So totally take on board the point that Kai raises around the likely impacts of COVID-19 and the opportunities for slippage. But I remain hopeful, particularly as part of this will enable some feasibility work to be done on the reintroduction of a station at Saltford. And this is something that we in Bath and North East Somerset have been striving for some time. So with that promise, I'm very happy to support this paper.
Thank you, Dina. Toby.
Chair, thank you. I would just like to welcome this paper. I think there's some really important investment opportunities for rail coming forward. You know, notwithstanding, you know, sharing, you know, Kai's frustration around just how long it takes to deliver rail. But, you know, there is, you know, we are able to demonstrate progress on that front as a result of a number of years of plugging away at this, you know, with Network Rail and others involved as part of any rail improvements. And I'm sure that this will be welcoming news for South Gloucestershire residents. A combination of the extended scope of Metro West 2 and the ongoing work with Network Rail to develop a new station at Charfield, that would come together to provide a really transformational offer between Yate and Bristol and between Yate and Gloucester. You know, a half-hourly service along that line. You know, that is a very different commuter proposition, which will be so important for us to be giving people an alternative to the car, which, you know, if you've seen that M5 corridor north to south, you know that it is already at capacity, and we do need to be making these sorts of bold investments in alternatives that will set us up well for the future as well.
Thank you very much. Don, I know you'll be looking particularly forward to getting Pill Station open. I think you and I have spoken in the past about how frustrating it's been in the time with people in the past, but if you'd welcome the fact that finally we're working with you, we're getting
I don't think Tim did it. So I'm going to welcome all the comments that colleagues have made, and I think Toby makes a particularly strong comment around housing development and getting people to and from places of work, shopping and leisure in a much more straightforward way. So that welcome those comments. I do think Kai makes a very valid point. We've made all these obligations around climate emergency and put as 2030 as our date. And I almost think we need to stamp on everything with Network Rail, so this has to be delivered before 2030, because otherwise we're not going to start meeting any of our requirements. And of course, in relation to local plan as well, because we can't actually move the people into the new homes if the rail lines and rail stations aren't open. So I do think we need to get an impetus behind people to say and give them some actual dates they need to deliver by. But other than that, I fully welcome the paper, and I just think it's great that we are, you know, moving forward in this public transport arena again. So thanks for all the work that's been put into it, and wholeheartedly accept it, and looking forward to being one of the first on-Peel station, of course, to take the train wherever it's going to go.
Absolutely, Don. Thank you. I'm hoping you dropped that in. Steve, the importance of suburban rail and its our connectivity from your perspective and from business, please. Steve, was there anything you'd like to add? If not, we will move on, please, to the vote. I see there are 12 recommendations. They're a mixture of WECA committee and joint committee. We can see how they are set out. Shazia, are you happy again if we were to take this en bloc and ask members if there were any recommendations that they were against?
So, Chair, if we could take 4, 5 and 12, because those are the ones relating to joint committee separately, then the others you can take en bloc.
Okay, so for purpose then, for this I'm going to ask members of the joint committee to indicate if they are against any of items 4, 5 or 12. You're happy, Shazia, that nobody has indicated therefore that they are approved from that perspective. And therefore on the remaining recommendations, which are for the combined authority members, the WECA members, please would you indicate if you are against any of those recommendations? Shazia, are you content that that process has worked and those have all been approved?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much. Strategic planning update is item 21. This report provides an update on strategic planning and seeks the formal agreement of the constituent authorities of the Combined Authority and North Somerset on the Memorandum of Understanding, which sets out the start of the process for strategic planning across the region. The MOU, in addition to the MOU, the report also gives an update on proposed broad timetables for strategic planning activities, sets out steps for the formal duty to cooperate arrangements, sets out the proposed programme governance, and finally, it's really important to note that offices in all authorities are continuing to work proactively with the Ministry for Housing, Community and Local Government in exploring planning freedoms to support the plan-making process and the development of a robust and effective strategy that can be delivered. Very, very important piece of work for us all, given all the work that's going on with our authorities in this area. I would be happy to move the recommendations, but Kai, was there an amendment you would like to put down?
Yeah, there is an amendment. I don't know how you want to deal with this. Do you want to put the amendment on the screen?
Shazia, can I ask you for technical advice, please? How do we do this?
We can put the amendment up if you would like that just for the public rather than reading it out.
And do you want me to move it now, Tim, or is there
and I was going to say, very happy if you move that amendment, Kai. May I look to members to accept the amendment, or as this virtual world, it's the reverse. Please would any members indicate if they are against that amendment? I note that nobody is, therefore we are accepting the amendment. Shazia, please, for correct process. Now, can we look for, having moved them and accepted the amendment, we technically look for a seconder now?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
So you're asking for a seconder for the recommendations as amended?
Oh,
correct. Thank you.
Oh,
Dina,
Dina
indicating as much. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you, Shazia, for ensuring that correct process is being seen to be following. Would any of you like to speak? Perhaps Dina, would you like to talk?
So you saw that I was seconding the motion as amended. Okay.
Indeed. Would you like to comment?
Yes, I think it is really important and necessary that we can move on to the replacement for the JSP, so we can move towards the SDS, and obviously having a memorandum of understanding between us, I think, is really important, and it will set a framework for us to all work within, obviously in broad terms, I'm pleased that we are now finally moving towards a plan that hopefully will eventually be something we will all agree with and will eventually get approved.
Thank you very much. Just as I'm seeing people, Toby, is there anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to welcome this report. I think it is important for us to have a strategic plan in place that can direct new development in our region, recognising that how people live and how people access work and other opportunities is not based on where the council boundary starts and finishes. We are a region, and we need to work on these sorts of things together. So I welcome today's decision to formally commence that work, and the high ambitions that we have for our future homes, infrastructure, and jobs. I think there's one really important element to this, which is of critical importance to South Gloucestershire, and that is making sure that government recognises the importance of this, and particularly the Planning Inspectorate. What we can't have is 5-year land supplies being used against individual unitary authorities, picking off sites outside of a plan-led approach, because ultimately we won't have an adoptable plan at the end of that if actually the locations that we eventually propose have already been undermined in the journey to get to an adoptable plan. So I'm happy to propose and support this report today. Future approval stages for this work will be dependent upon our ability to negotiate those flexibilities with government, so that we can have as much confidence as possible that the time, effort and money that we're going to put into this is going to deliver a successful outcome for all of our communities at the end.
Toby, thank you very much. Kai, was there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think I better comment, given that we proposed an amendment in Bristol. Yeah, I'd just like to say, obviously, the United Nations sustainability goals have been around since 2015, and obviously the UK government has signed up to those as an international commitment. So I know there was very warm support for using these, and so the purpose of the amendment is just to strengthen that within the documentation and the report. But we see them as very important in Bristol, because what they do is they recognise the interdependence between the social issues that we have to tackle and the environmental issues, and also a key part of the Sustainable Development Goals is that partnership working that I think we're all trying to promote in the region. But obviously we've got some very serious social issues around education, hunger, gender equality, decent work, the need for strong civil institutions, and also the environmental issues that we're trying to tackle, climate change, life in the sea, life on land, and responsible production and consumption. So I think as we plan what the region looks like and what the housing development looks like and what the development looks like, I think given that it's a framework that has such broad support in the country and obviously internationally, it's a very good framework for us to work through when we're looking at the plan going forward. And also what we're asking in terms of the work from officers is obviously they work through the detail of the statement of common ground with the Planning and Housing Board, and obviously we hope that they will then report back on progress to this committee in future, and the joint committee, just how they've incorporated the SDGs into the plan going forward. So I think we can all buy into this. The UK government has signed up to these goals, so I think it's something that we can all rally around and use as a positive framework in how we want the area to look like going forward. Thank you.
Kai, thank you very much. Don, vital part North Somerset play in our housing needs. Your thoughts, please.
Well, again, echoing Toby's concern about if we don't get this right, then we'll be driven down a path we don't want to go. I think it's vital that we take forward quickly our planning process. And I'm just been very supportive of us moving as quickly as we possibly can on all of this, and probably most important of all, listening to our communities as to how they see we want to move forward, as opposed to being pushed in any other way. And any planning reforms, I think, would be extremely useful, because we do need to have some freedom for how we actually apply this. So, you know, to our particular requirements within the west of England. So very supportive of the whole thing. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. I appreciate just how busy you are. I'm pleased you've been able to stay with us a little longer. Was there anything you'd like to comment around this paper, please?
No, I welcome it, Chair. I mean, there is a lot for us to work through across the city region, and make sure that we're making decisions that are significant and in many instances are going to be lifelong decisions. So they're going to impact communities for many years to come. I want us to get this as right as we can, recognising that a joined up approach across the city region has got to be better than individual areas not working together. So absolutely welcome this. The important bit for me is let's learn from some of the previous things that we've done, and make sure that as we're thinking about where housing goes, we're thinking about employment, we're thinking about infrastructure, and we're thinking about connectivity from day one. What I don't want to see are little islands popping up that are not connected to anything. So we've got an opportunity to, I think, come together and do this right.
Steve, thank you very much. So Shazia, please correct me if I get this process modelled, but I think for the first point, we are going to take a recommendation from the joint committee that we agree the memorandum of understanding. So,
yes, and just to confirm, you proposed all of the recommendations for both committees, and Councillor Romero seconded both of those.
And therefore, please, for all members, please could you indicate for approving the memorandum of understanding if you are against? Charles, we're happy to duly note therefore that everyone
is in agreement.
Favour, and therefore for the other WECA only recommendations, of which we are asked to note number 3, but of the other 7 of the 8, please would West of England Combined Authority members indicate if they are against any of those recommendations. Charles, are you happy that you have seen?
So on that basis, everyone's in agreement.
Perfect, thank you very much indeed. And therefore we move on to item 22, an update on the climate emergency planning, an update on that. As this is an update, there's an awful lot there. We have touched in many areas, and I think from earlier conversations, it's going to be really important that we share with people, both within, across all of our councils and the public, so much of the work that's already taking place that is going to have real benefits around the climate emergency. I know, for instance, we'll move on to green infrastructure in a minute. So there are an awful lot of things happening, both from the combined authorities perspective and our councils. And I think it's probably time that we need to come together to start sharing just what some of that work is achieving in that space. The important paper for us all to look at here. This is an update, and whilst there are no actual decisions to be taken, I'm very happy to ask the committee to formally note the recommendations, but also now to ask you if you had any comments. So looking at where I can see you in terms of lineups, Kai, were there any comments you'd like to make?
No, thanks, Tim. It's kind of a report on a report, isn't it, really? So
thank
you. Cheers, thank you.
Looking across, Dina, I can see you next. Any comments?
Thank you. Yeah, I'd just like to sort of, I guess, echo some of the comments that were made by the public speakers earlier. So I've made a note of Sam Morris, I think, from Extinction Rebellion, you know, and I think I would support some of the concerns that were raised by those speakers. You know, accepting that this is a report to note, I think we can do better. You know, at the moment, this is still not good enough. Climate emergency still feels like it's an add-on. I think we need to find a way of properly embedding climate emergency as an overriding or underpinning principle to absolutely everything we are doing. We say that's what we're doing, but are we doing enough, I think? And that's one of the questions that we need to be constantly asking ourselves. What more could we be doing? How can we make this better? How can we do things faster? Because a climate emergency is, you know, our words, but unless we're actually moving swiftly, I don't think we're taking the word emergency seriously enough. So whilst I am happy to note what is here, I would just like to stress there is far more we could be doing, and that's what I hope we will be doing, and we'll be doing it at pace. Thank you.
Dina, thank you very much. Perhaps just so I can see on the screens, Toby and then Don.
Chair, thank you. I'd certainly echo what Dina has said around that we should always challenge ourselves as to whether we are being ambitious enough on what we're doing. I would then just repeat a point that I've made in various other reports today, which I think is that climate emergency thread that does run through what we do. Whether, you know, the report that we've already considered on COVID-19, the changes we've made to via the Constitution to the boards, the investment funds decisions that we've made around walking, cycling, green infrastructure, and the various bus reports that we've considered to date. I think that there's very clearly an enormous amount going on at pace to deliver on the climate emergency. And I think what I'm looking forward to in the October report is, I think this will then be helpful in better explaining and communicating this to the public, is seeing all in one place how all these different things have been captured, so that you are able to see in one place the full range of interventions that we are making, and indeed have been making, you know, for a number of years, not only since we each made these declarations.
Thank you very much, Toby. Don, any thoughts?
Thank you. Yes, I mean, we've intimated throughout this meeting today actions we're taking in relation to the climate emergency, but I think it would be very useful to formulate an action list with some timelines in them, so that we don't expect members who are both of our own councils and members of the public watching more widely to try to draw those strands in themselves. I think we've expressed the emergencies. We need to get a proper action plan with timelines into it, so that we can see where we're going. Because I'm not wholly sure that that is desperately clear. I think the intent is there, but I just worry that it's very hard to hold people to account. So certainly for the October report, it has to be a much more time-limited, detailed document, referring back clearly to other pieces of work that are being done. It doesn't need to be hundreds of pages long, but almost an action table. So thank you.
Don, thank you very much indeed. Shazia, are we happy to effectively take the noting on block, or do we formally need to note from WECA and separately from joint? How do you
We need to do the two separately, please.
Okay, so WECA committee members, please would you indicate if you are not happy to note? Therefore, I take it I see we all are. And for the record and for due process, for everybody who's a member of the joint committee, please again, would you indicate if you are not in favour of noting? Happy therefore, Shazia? Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful. Item 23, the West of England Joint Green Infrastructure Strategy. and we're hoping today to get endorsement of a joint green infrastructure strategy for the region. Touched on it just a second or two ago. Again, this is an example of very practical action that is already being taken in delivering immediately as part of those actions around climate emergency. And I think it's really important that we do highlight that as members here about what's going on. So yes, we're looking here to provide a framework for delivering a strategically planned and managed infrastructure network. This has been endorsed by both the Environment Agency and Natural England, and it'll provide a green infrastructure evidence, guidance and tools to support the delivery of other regional and local plans and strategies, including both our local industrial strategy, joint local transport plan, local plans and the future strategic planning. And I think it's important how we see all these things coming together. And it does give us another opportunity to position the region post-COVID recovery and renewal by setting out this longer term strategic vision for delivering green infrastructure, which I know is something we're all very, very keen to see. Finally, and just to note that through the investment fund report we considered earlier, we have agreed an allocation of £300,000 to develop and move forward quickly on specific infrastructure proposals. I'm very happy to move those recommendations. May I look for a seconder who can second on both behalf? Thank you, Toby, of both the combined authority and the joint committee. So for the record, Toby's seconded on behalf of those. Very keen now to ask members if they would like to speak to it. Toby, perhaps you'd like to start.
Thank you, Chair. Would like to welcome this report, and particularly just repeating what you said earlier, just around that we've approved funding to actually get on and start to deliver a number of projects. We know how important green infrastructure is, that easy access to the great outdoors, and particularly in the last few months, as you know, during that lockdown. And I think appreciating the importance that ready and easy access to open spaces, to appreciate biodiversity and nature, how extraordinarily important that is for our mental health, as well as our physical health, and how that is intrinsically linked not just with the climate emergency, but also with our local economy, and having a healthy workforce to be supporting our economic aims. I'm particularly I'm looking forward to seeing ambitious proposals come forward from the directors and working groups, in order that we can move at pace with delivering some of this. Thank you.
Wonderful. Dina, any thoughts you'd like to share?
In a similar vein to Toby's comments, I think certainly welcome the report and the strategy, and I think during the course of the lockdown, we've all appreciated that green space, and I think it has a marked difference to people's mental health as well as physical well-being, and therefore that will have an impact too on the health of the population, the health of the economy, as well as the health of our local area and planet as well. So yes, can't do more than just endorse what is set out here.
Thank you. Kai, I was going to ask you next, but I'm not sure if you've got another conversation going on. So shall I go to Don next, please, and then come back to
No, I'm happy to comment, Tim. I was just
okay. Thank you.
I was actually discussing this report. So no, obviously, welcome it. It's good to have something like this. I've always been interested in the skills agenda in terms of how we meet the challenges going forward. And obviously, WECA's got a key role to play in that in terms of the adult education and skills. Obviously, there's going to be a transition. So we're going to have to move away from some of the more polluting activities that we do at the moment. And I kind of always use the example of the gas fitter. So the skills that the gas fitter uses at the moment, if they're still doing that job in 10 to 15 years' time, we've probably failed. But so the question is, how do you use the skills that those engineers possess for the new technologies that are coming forward, the water source heat pumps, the district heating systems, the insulation. And I'm not confident that in terms of our skills agenda and strategy, we're quite there yet in terms of how we're going to manage that transition. So I think an important part of this document and work is going to have to be how we look at making sure our funding of skills and our strategy around skills is set up to deal with the new skills that will be required to deal with the new technologies that are coming forward that we're going to have to use to deal with the climate emergency. So I think that's a very important point that I felt I had to make, really, that we need to really focus on that.
Kai, thank you very much. And Don, in terms of the joint green infrastructure strategy, very keen to get any comments from you there.
Supportive of it. I mean, I think that the lockdown and the release has pushed far more people out into the countryside, into our green infrastructure than possibly has been the case before. And I think we need to capture that. There is praise for South Gloucestershire. I've been enjoying the Forgotten Landscape series of walks on the Severn Vale and round there. Very well posted with leaflets, and I've seen lots of families and groups of people following the same thing. Very, very cheap to do, far cheaper than cycleways, roads, or anything like that. Let's try and make sure we build on these people's love of the countryside, because if they love the countryside, they're thinking much more of the environment and their impact upon it anyway. So psychologically, it's good. And also getting people out fresh air and exercise is brilliant. So very supportive of this. And thanks for everyone that's doing stuff so far. And let's look forward to more of it. Thank you.
Don, wonderful. Thank you very much. So Shazia, I'm going to suppose that we take the WECA committee recommendations 1 and 2 first, and then joint committee ones. So from combined authority members, WECA committee members, please would you indicate if you are not in favour of the 2 recommendations as published. Shazia, you're happy therefore that everyone's agreed those. And from a joint committee perspective, please would you indicate if you are not in favour of either of the 2 recommendations as published. Shazia, are you happy with that in terms of process?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much. Item 24, the Local Enterprise Partnership and Invest Bristol and Bath budget outturn for April 2019 to March 2020. I think the report is probably covered as much by the title. So I'm very happy to move the recommendations as set out in the report. Please may I look for a seconder and then ask for comments. Dina, I think, yep, thank you. So please, could we open up some comments? Dina, was there anything you'd like to start with?
I don't think I've got anything in particular that I want to raise here. I think it's just important to note where we are. Obviously, it's been a particularly strange time, and this is a report from just before that time. So yes, just to note. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dina. Kai, perhaps if there was any thoughts.
No, happy with the reports in.
Perfect. Toby and then Don, if we may, please.
Nothing to add, Chair. I welcome the report.
Okay. Don, very keen on your thoughts. I have asked one of my colleagues just to give me an update on the impact for North Somerset, which I'll happily share with you afterwards. But any other comments, please?
Well, yeah, thank you. The comment that I've raised before and will come raise again now is I don't know how good a name Invest Bath and Bristol. Invest in the West sounds a bit more catchy, and it will actually cover North Somerset, which I don't think gets desperately strong looking under the current regime. So that's all. Apart from that, happy to support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And as I say, I will ask. I'll share some quite interesting information there about a lot of the sport that's happened for you. So thank you very much. Looking at this, Shazia, we are all joint committee voting, so we are asked to formally note 1, 2 pieces there, and then to approve item C. So may I ask you to indicate if you are not happy with any of those recommendations? Charles, here again, may I ask you just to confirm that you're happy with that process?
Okay. We can see everybody and nobody's voted against, so.
Perfect. 25, the Local Enterprise Partnership One Front Door Funding Programme. Our final report for today. Quick summarise, provides an update on our LGF, Local Growth Fund Programme, and the profile of spend, sets out changes to schemes within the current funding programme, which we're looking for approval for, seeks a delegation to grant awards through the Research and Innovation Challenge Fund, funded through the European Regional Development Fund and Investment Fund, provides an update on the additional government funding of over £500,000 provided for the Southwest Energy Hub, and updates on applications for innovative renewable energy projects for the Low Carbon Challenge Fund. I hope members won't mind me just highlighting the fact again, there's a lot of work in there in terms of carbon reduction. And again, very important for us all to understand that work that's going on. Very happy to move recommendation as they're set out. May I look for a seconder, please? Can I see Toby's hand being raised there? Toby, you were happy seconding? Yep.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Toby, was there anything you'd like to comment on then, please?
Just to say, Chair, that I welcome the report. I didn't have any specific comments to make.
Jolly good. Don, perhaps we could ask you if you had any comments.
Yeah, I think I do. One quick question. If Malcolm Coe is on the call, I wonder if he could just clarify the LGF risk. I think it's on page 504, items 4.1 to 4.4. I'm frankly trying to flick through my documents. So
okay. Malcolm is with us. Malcolm, I don't know if you're able to give Don an answer here and now, or is it something you would need to just take away?
It's on the funding security, really.
Malcolm, would you like to comment?
Of course, Chair. So for the LGF, we are in the final year of the LGF programme. So the deadline for spend is actually March 21, which we've known for some time now. And members will be aware we have had the programme fully programmed out. So we have got plans. In fact, we've over-programmed by 12 million to try and manage the risk to make sure we do spend our allotted funding by the end of the financial year. We have also successfully managed to swap projects out of LGF into other funding streams to minimise the risk of not spending. That said, obviously with COVID, there will be some delays in some of the projects, and we are constantly reviewing this. And there has been a change in the way the government are given the funding this time around. So rather than give us the entire funding up front, they're only giving us 2/3, with the final third subject to review around deliverability. Now, I think as a region, we're in a strong position. I think we're delivering much better than several of the other LEP areas across the country, but there is still a risk of us not achieving the full spend by March 21. But we're doing everything we can, working with our finance colleague across the region to minimise that risk.
Thanks, Malcolm.
Thank you, Don, if that covers that. Yep. Dina, please, any comments?
Yeah, it's a similar point, really. It's about, what reassurance is there that the programme committee's commitment, will actually be met? So I guess it's another question for Malcolm.
Well, Chair, if I may, we do every single month go around to every unitary authorities and work with your colleagues to say, well, what are the risks around deliverability? So we are every single month looking at what's happening on the ground, what progress is being made. Now, I can't say any of this fund is not risk-free, but we are doing everything we can to minimise those risks. So if there are, like we have done in the last couple of months, if we don't think we're going to deliver a project by time, we do look at our other funding streams available to try and swap projects in and out. The programme we've got in front of you now is the best programme that we have for LGF, with the best chance of delivering it by this March's deadline. So we are as confident as we can be, but I can't say here it does not any risk involved in this, but we are keep reviewing it every month.
Okay, thank you.
So the key for me, Dina, is the fact that Malcolm's working with your colleagues and everybody else in terms of both pushing this, but analysing and studying it to make sure we get the best mix. Yep. Thank you, Kai. Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. It's the same one, really. I've been asked to raise this as well, that risk around that hard deadline of the 31st of March. So we're very concerned that we'll lose some of the money on offer. So the question is, to you really, Tim. Has there been any lobbying around that to maybe try and get a 12-month extension to the deadline? Obviously, if not, would you be able to do that on our behalf, just so we?
I can assure you that I have raised that both politically, and I know that we are through the M9 group at the moment. At the moment, we aren't getting commitments on that, which is why we are working at pace with Malcolm around this. But the point, I have been making the points, as have other Metro mayors. And in that case, can we move to the votes? This is for all members of the joint committee. The recommendations be moved and seconded and are as published. Please would you indicate if you are not in favour of any of those recommendations? Shazia, are you happy therefore you witnessed that? And
yes, Chair.
These recommendations are approved. And therefore that just takes us to item 26, which is just that a reminder that as we close this meeting, details of the decisions taken at this meeting in the draft minutes will be published on the Combined Authority website as soon as possible, along with the public statements submitted, questions and the answers. And really, therefore, thank you very much indeed. Can I express my very, very sincere thanks to Ian and Shazia in making this meeting come together in the virtual world. Appreciate how much work goes on within our DEM services, also the way in which I know that Ian and Shazia have been able to work with other colleagues in councils to understand how to make these meetings as effective as possible. And also, as always, a very, very big thank you to officers of all of our authorities and the Combined Authority for the tireless work they're putting in for the region. And on that happy note, my clock on my computer says 13:51. So if whoever's taking the minutes would like to record that we're duly closing then. Thank you all very much indeed. Really enjoyed this. Please take care, and I will look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Tim. Bye.